Good evening, welcome. Please stand for the pledge and remain standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have Deacon Phil Ocasio from the Church of the Ascension. Hi.
Let us pray. And let us pray for a moment in silence, each of us in our individual beliefs. And we continue this prayer by giving thanks for so many good things we've received, family and friends, but this beautiful town that we're privileged to live in. We thank you for these citizens that are gathered here and live in this town, and for the public officials that are gathered here today. Bless this town council. May they always act and make judgments based on the values that we all hold so dear. And may they serve one another as we all try to serve one another with competence, with dignity and respect, with charity and generosity. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lacrone.
Present.
Councilmember Charneau.
Present.
Councilmember Tolas.
I'm here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Magazine.
Here.
Councilmember Spellich.
Thank you. The first item are the reports by mayor, council members, and the town manager. Grady, do you have anything?
I have no report, Mayor. Thank you.
Council people?
Sure.
Yes, council, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the privilege to attend the Ballet Under the Stars. I think Councilman Charneau was there as well. What a wonderful event. It was a gorgeous night under the, I think, full moon. But I was very impressed and had the opportunity to give the opening remarks, which was a little emotional because it was 9/11, but I was very impressed with that event. So.
Thank you. We really appreciate you going to that and representing us. Councilman?
This morning, our Economic Development Director and I attended the Science and Technology Roundtable sponsored and chaired by the Mayor of Scottsdale. We were sitting in for Mayor Dickey, who had another engagement. There was a roundtable of mayors, and each of the mayors talked about the progress they're making, particularly in economic development, science, technology, and so on. Even towns smaller than Fountain Hills, Litchfield Park, Goodyear, and so on, who are further from the urban core, are having a lot of success. They're concentrating on improvements to position themselves for the future. They mentioned improved infrastructure like roads, high-speed internet connectivity, and transportation, education, and so on. I was glad they didn't call on me. I wasn't sitting at the round table because I'm not a mayor, which was good, because we don't have the assets that a lot of them have. We don't have a lot of available land. The cost of housing is expensive, financial challenges, our employment base, you know how much trouble we have getting employees for some of our companies. It occurs to me that we don't know what we want to be. I've heard Councilman Tolas say that a number of times. And I don't think the draft 2020 plan, which we'll be discussing later, helps us to make that determination. In my mind, we don't have a, no, I'm not just reporting, I'm editorializing. We don't have a strategy. We have a number of ideas that don't necessarily fit together. I think we need to determine what kind of growth is in our citizens' best interest. We should be talking to our neighbors. That's what these other mayors were doing. They were talking to their mayors and learning best practices that they could use to help them develop their towns. I think that's a starting point for us. And then we have to think about a strategy rather than a scattergun approach. I didn't think this would be of much value to me, this round table, but it was. Just listening to the others and hearing what they're doing and the successes they're having. Now, keep in mind, they're mayors. They're not going to tell you the negative things. They only talk about the positive things, but there were enough positive things that got me to thinking about our own situation.
Thank you. I had a couple of meetings too. First of all, I wanted to say I was remiss last time when I did the appointments. I thanked the committee that did the interviews for the commissions, but I wanted to thank the outgoing commissioners and all of the people that applied, and then, of course, congratulate the people that we look forward to working with. So I want to make sure I said that. I had gone to the Greater Phoenix Economic Council meeting. They have a meeting every quarter of supervisors and mayors. And James Smith also attended that, so we've been keeping him running around a lot, but it was very interesting. They have a short-term, bold campaign that they were doing in some other places to try to wrangle them into Arizona, which obviously helps us too. And with Maricopa County being the fastest-growing county, that's all positive. They're having a Greater Phoenix Fest on the 4th of October that James is also going to attend because I'll be out of town, but we really appreciate that. It's just invaluable, the contacts that he's able to make and the experience that he has. One thing about Greater Phoenix Economic Council is that they're going to be, I don't know if they did it yet, but they're either going to do or they just did a big editorial that's going to be a P20 focus, which a little bit along with what you were saying is showing that they're starting to really recognize education as an economic driver. So I think we're very aligned with that. Alan is our board rep, and you'll be going to a GPEC meeting next week about that. And an educational STEM meeting, that was the one that you went to today, right? Yes, that was great. The East Valley Mayor's Lunch this quarter was at Salt River, Pima. Maricopa Indian Community, we talked about the census, which we're going to talk about tonight a little bit. We talked about Prop 400, which Mike knows all about, the renewal of the transportation tax, and economic development along the 202. Ribbon cuttings are back in full force. It's a very exciting time. I know we all get very happy when we get those 70s in the morning, and it's just going to get better and better, and the businesses are really waking up, so really appreciate that too. Next, we have our our proclamation, which is September 17th through the 23rd is Constitution Week. I had heard from the Daughters of the American Revolution and Candy Shottle, right? And I'm going to read it from up here because I have the microphone, and then I'll come down and present it. So it says, whereas September 17th, 2019 marks the 232nd anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it's fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document, its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, Jenny Dickey, Mayor of Town of Fountain Hills, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution that they had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties, remembering that lost rights may never be regained. If you'd like to come up, I'll present this to you, and I thank you for bringing it to our attention. You want to come up? Come on. Thanks a lot. Next, we are having a presentation on the census. Is that the next item, Grady?
Yes, it is, Mayor. Mayor and Council, before you tonight, we're going to have our communications and marketing coordinator come up. Grace, if you wouldn't mind. Grace is going to give you a brief synopsis of the upcoming census for 2020. As you're aware, there's some high stakes involved with the census. The whole region is participating in a regional effort on this. A lot of the formula grants and aid that we receive from Washington, D.C., community development block grants, transportation dollars, a lot of things that we take for granted here in the region and in the state are all based on that. Plus, such things as determining the number of representatives that get reapportioned by state all comes out of this. So it's all, as a growing state, it's very important to us. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Gutter, who is going to go ahead and give you an update on this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Good evening, members of the council. Thank you to yourselves and the public for a brief few moments of your time to discuss the upcoming Census 2020. Census Day is April 1st, 2020. It'll be here before we know it, no joke. It's coming quite quickly, and as our town manager mentioned, the census is quite important, not only to our town, but to the region, to the country, etc. It determines, as Mr. Miller mentioned, how many seats we get in Congress. It also helps guide the more than $675 billion that are dispersed based on this count. It helps to create jobs, prepare for emergencies, and it provides guidance in the building of schools and roads. Myself and 3 other members of staff have compiled our complete census count committee. We act as the liaisons between our town and our regional census group, who have provided us with many wonderful toolkits for online reach, newspapers, social media toolkits, many wonderful avenues for reaching the public and really inspiring folks in what this census means and how we will be guided through this process. The largest change that is coming in this census, as opposed to the last census, is that the Census Committee will be doing online data gathering, which means that on April 1st, you can go to the 2020 census.gov website and complete the questionnaire. After that, then the Census Bureau will begin canvassing. They are expected to see a greater than 70% compliance rate with the online. However, the Census Regional Committee is very aware of some restrictions that we have: group housing, the elderly, other groups who may feel uncomfortable with entering their information on computers. And so it's important to remember that door-to-door canvassing will still remain a component of the census. It is not, however, the first line of what we will see. From that, it is also important to remember the Census Committee is asking folks to answer the questionnaire where they are on Census Day. This is incredibly important to communities like ourselves that see an influx with snowbirds or different winter visitors. Where you are on April 1st is where you will complete your questionnaire to make sure that you're not double counted. Are there any questions that I can answer for you folks?
Any questions, Mike?
So with the online survey, can you take it April 2nd, or does it have to be on the 1st?
You can take it on the 2nd. It opens up on the 1st. And they are expecting quite a bit of compliance from April 1st and in the immediate subsequent days to follow.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Just one other thing, just really quickly on this. So, again, this is all a regional effort. So the town is participating with Maricopa Association of Governments. The town of Fountain Hills has a modest amount of money that we're going to be using that the council appropriated this year. I believe it's $5,000. We also are part of the regional effort. There's going to be a $2 million regional effort on this, where there will be $2 million in advertising, radio ads, everything we can do to try to reach out to people and encourage them to be counted. So this is a really high-stakes game here. As one of the fastest-growing states, you've been reading around. In fact, I think the vice mayor shared an article with a number of us that indicated that we have 200 people a day moving into Arizona. So this is just really showing that for us to get our share of federal dollars, it's very important. We also use this number for state shared revenue. So it's all basically a very important aspect. So we encourage you to encourage your constituents to get out there and be counted.
Absolutely. And please let your constituents know to be aware that the Census.gov website is live, and shortly to come, we will have some information on our municipal website for them to reach out with any questions, concerns, guidance that they might have. This is an incredibly important questionnaire as we move forward into our future. Well, we want to let folks know that everyone counts.
That's right. And the MAG effort is called hashtag, lowercase I count 2020. And I want to thank the Times, Orion and Bob, because and Brent, because the article that you did was really comprehensive, and we'll just make sure that we hit them on in every way that we can so that everybody knows. And maybe we'll have like a really awesome winter, and everybody will hang out in Fountain Hills until after April 1st, and we'll get them counted here.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other questions? Thank you. Next is, whoops, hold on one second. Our call to the public is next. These are items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do, Mayor. The first is Timothy Lynch.
Anyway, haven't reached the microphone yet.
Hi.
It was 2 sessions ago. Hi, my name is Tim Lynch. It was 2 sessions ago I mentioned that it'd be nice to have a community-based transitional facility here, homeless shelter, if you want to call it something outside of the faith-based aspect that we have. There's a good man works out of the Extended Hands Food Bank, David Iverson. He would be the go-to guy if there was a community-based transitional facility here. I came down here about 6 years ago from Central Oregon, Sisters, and got my last 2 children through high school here. And in the meantime, I've been in bench trials and evicted and Chamber of Commerce member of SAR, trying to be as much in tune with the community as I can possibly be. But I was astounded that there is absolutely no safety net for people like me. I won an eviction court. I told the judge that the landlord's ledger was erroneous, and he gave me the opportunity to perform under a verbal agreement that I had with my landlord. By then it was too late, and so I was evicted. A lot of things have happened since. All my tools have been taken from me. A lot of things that happened during that bench trial, which I also won on a pro se, are all but null and void. So there are things that I feel accomplished about, but I don't feel accomplished in any way, shape, or form, that this community of some 22 or 23,000 people, depending on what time of year, doesn't have a safety net for people like me. I'm not a criminal. I do have a lot of repeat offenses in civil and traffic law because I don't believe in privilege and sovereign immunity law. I think it's a money grab. I don't have a driver's license, which exacerbates everything. And I look in a kind of a panacea way. I look at this community being progressive and bicycle friendly and possibly accommodating, not necessarily low income housing as we know it, but a facility, a transitional living facility for people like me. And I've got a whole bunch of ideas, and I wish I can pique your interest tonight. And if something happens, I'll be very proud at 64.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch.
Okay. Did I pique any of your interest? Any
We,
questions?
I call to the public, we just hear from the public, and then at the end of the meeting, if we would like to follow up on anything, we let our,
Please do. Please do.
thank you.
Thanks.
Any other cards, Liz?
Yes, Carl Bushman.
Thank you. Hi.
Thank you very much for the limited time I have, but I'm here because I just witnessed a tremendous accident in an area where I live, Sunflower and Palisades. Was published in the paper, was a rollover, and we are taking our life into our hands every day. There are 3 roads. There's East Sunflower, there's North Sunflower, and there's Jackrabbit. All those streets, there are 3 of them, that merge at the intersection on Palisades. Each day we witness speeding cars up and down. There's an obstructed view on the oncoming traffic on the right side. And if you take your life into your hands trying to make a left turn, you look up there to see to what extent there is oncoming traffic. If there's nothing, you venture out, and by that time there might be somebody coming 60 or 70 miles an hour down, and then we have to seek refuge in the left turn signal. It's an accident waiting to happen. Now, there are 2 real reasons for it. Number 1, there should be a 4-way stop sign at that intersection. 4-way. And I think you have already received that kind of an information from others in our area. But now, for the first time, there's a serious accident, and also, as you probably remember, a death down near the high school last year. Now, that is enough, and I think it's imperative that you do something about us who are living there and we're witnessing speeders, because if you don't do it, what's happening is that you're protecting speeders, law violators that are going up and down Palisades instead of us who are trying to live there and do a peaceful existence. And if you compare some of the roads that are similar to us, for example, Saguaro, it's got a 35-mile speed limit. El Lago has a 30-mile speed limit, and there's a side street coming in, and there's a stop sign. We don't have a stop sign. We have 3 roads coming into this area. There's Sunridge, has a traffic light. There's 1 road coming into Palisades. There's a traffic light. We have nothing. So you've heard this before, and your engineering department, Sam, last time when they saw the issue or dealt with the issue, they concluded there were no accidents, so why do anything? It seems to me that an engineering department would do a much better job, using the criteria that are applicable to engineering and finding out what the situation is. Excuse me. That pretty much ends my presentation. You have any questions? Fine. Okay.
Thank you.
For
Thank
letting
you.
me talk.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mayor and Council, while I won't get it to the points that have been mentioned specifically, our town engineer is in the audience tonight. I'll work with the town engineer to look at the comments that have been made tonight. We certainly always look at traffic accident data, and we'll take a look at this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Next, we have our consent agenda. Could I please have a motion?
Move approval of the consent agenda?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I got it right this time. Okay. The first item on our regular agenda is the consideration of adopting resolution that approves an intergovernmental agreement with Fort McDowell relating to Prop 202. Grady?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, this item before you is a routine item. We do this every year. You'll recall that back in 2002, there was a gaming compact that the voters approved. Essentially, it's known as Prop 202, and the funding, basically 12% of the Indian gaming revenues are available to the neighboring communities and nonprofits. And so what is before you tonight is an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Fountain Hills and Fort McDowell tribal community. It has identified $77,500 in grants, of which the town is going to be a recipient of about $10,000. The way it works is basically the town is a pass-through for this money. So basically the applicants for various different entities apply to Fort McDowell, and it gets passed on through the town. And then basically the town will be forwarding this information on to Fort McDowell. So this is basically so the town can participate in this program, and it assists the other entities that actually are recipients of the grants and aid. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on this.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Just to express our appreciation, of course, to Fort McDowell for not only remembering us, but the Rivertime Museum, the Fountain Hills Unified School District, and the Fountain Hills Theater. We really appreciate that, and that this is used for marketing and tourism and for education and other commerce activities. So can I please get a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-47.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next item then is the purchasing agreement about cameras and fire safety inspections. Grady?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. The item before you is a cooperative purchasing agreement in an amount not to exceed $100,000. It's not that we're going to spend $100,000, but you recall in the capital improvement program we have $50,000 that we've been spending annually for, I believe, like the last 3 years, where we're installing cameras like at this campus and each of our parks so that we can improve our ability to catch vandals that might be damaging park restrooms or some of the public art that we have at Fountain Park. We also have, as part of this item, we were having separate contracts for the fire safety inspections and monitoring. And so rather than having separate contracts, we decided to merge those into one master contract, and that is what is before you tonight. Our Public Works Director is also here to be able to answer any questions you may have on this particular item.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman?
Justin, it says not to exceed $100,000. What was the contract last year?
Madam Mayor and Council Member, the contract last year for the cameras was $50,000, and I do not have the total amount for the fire protection and inspections for all of our facilities. So I think it was, and I don't want to give you a bad number, I can certainly get back to you with that number.
That's not necessary. Do you remember what it was not to exceed last year?
Last year, I believe it was just under $60,000 or $70,000 because there was some additional work for the monitoring and some repairs that we needed.
Then why the significant increase this year?
The reason for the increase is we are combining two. So $50,000 of this contract is set aside just for a CIP project, which is to continue to install cameras to monitor our parks and our campus. The remaining portion of that, approximately $50,000, is to do the inspections, monitoring, and maintenance for all of our fire protection for all the town-owned campuses and buildings.
Just an aside, congratulations on the stop signs. I think they're terrific. Been hearing a lot of positive feedback. I mean, the lights and so on.
We appreciate that. I will extend that to the staff and the town manager as well. It's a team effort.
Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. So Justin, on the security cameras for the parks, I know we have some existing already, correct?
Yes, we do.
And then, so we're going to add some more, correct?
Correct.
And then will this be all that we need, or there'll be some more next year, or is this adequate, or?
Madam Mayor, Council Member, we are going to continue to add cameras and the appliances. And when I say appliance, it's the recording and storing device that allows us to utilize the information when needed over the next several years. Most likely by the time we finish this in 2 or 3 years, we may come back to the council and ask for some funding to replace the original and outdated appliances and cameras that were purchased now probably 10 to 12 years ago.
And are these work pretty adequately at nighttime, or how does that work? I mean, or not at all in terms of darkness?
Councilmember, depending on the location and what it is we are trying to achieve, we have incredibly high-resolution nighttime cameras at different locations at all of the facilities.
Another thing I just want to point out, too, the Community Services Director brought to my attention that probably the oldest cameras we have anywhere are currently in the community center. And when we had a threat assessment done both in this building and the community center, that was one of the items that was identified for replacement. We do think the good news on that is the technology's improved tremendously. Those are still analog cameras over there, so they're not even digital. And we think we can consolidate the number because now a lot of these are either 180 or 360. They have motorized bodies that are under the bubbles like you see in casinos and places like that. So the cost keeps coming down on these, and we think that we can really improve the safety and security over there. So those are some cameras that you'll probably be seeing. Probably through the next budget cycle, we'll be probably increasing this $50,000 next year to probably include the community center as well.
Councilman?
Thank you. Director Weldy, how many cameras will $50,000 buy approximately?
And this year, we're probably going to install a total of 6 cameras. The cameras are relatively inexpensive. The expensive part of this is the appliances. So that is the wireless that drives from the camera to the appliance and the storage. We do not have connectability to some of our parks, and we also, it's just not feasible to run hardwire from the cameras back to the support center. So it's really the facilities, the appliances, and the wireless antennas that are the most expensive, but approximately 6 this year.
Thank you. And is this the only company we've talked to about doing the monitoring and watching the security system and installing cameras?
It is not. In fact, every couple of years we go back and review existing contracts and speak to them individually to determine what the best cost and the best bet is. And we've established over the last several years that it's Climate Tech.
I appreciate that information. Thank you very much. And I will echo also how nice I think our stoplight systems have become.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. This may have been answered by Mr. Miller, but did we evaluate the cost of maintenance versus getting the new cameras in some of those areas?
Madam Mayor and Council, Vice Mayor, indeed we have. So the cameras, if you're referencing the stuff in the community center, the maintenance and the technology almost doesn't exist for those anymore because this type of technology has zoomed forward. So the maintenance on it would just be too expensive, and some of the hardware and or software is simply not available, and some of them are not capable of achieving the end goal that we would like to achieve in that particular building.
So this was more cost effective, and that's why we decided on this.
Yes, ma'am. And this year, the community center isn't in this, but it is more cost effective for the locations, most of them new for where they are going. We are only replacing a few this year. The majority of this year's work will be new.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And just as a point of clarification, I think it was 2 years ago, one of the cameras that was at Golden Eagle Park was actually vandalized and actually destroyed. So, you know, we've got that up against as well. So that was one of the older camera systems that occurred too. So it is, I think despite the temperature, you know, outdoor cameras really they take a toll because of the heat. But they're much more durable now than they used to be. But part of what Justin didn't really describe, nor myself, is part of what is involved in this contract is also the layout, the design, and the labor costs. So as you know, labor costs typically are a big part of anything you do. And so with Climate Tech, that's a big part of what we do on these projects.
Do we have any speaker cards on this item? This kind of company wouldn't do traffic cameras, would they? That's something specific?
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure whether or not Climate Tech has a TOC or a Traffic Operations Center portion because we have simply not spoken to them about that.
Okay, and then thank you. That's something that we've talked about as a little bit goes along with some of the concerns that we've been hearing about a lot of speeding and other things like that. And then as far as this area, the Civic Center area, the plaza, or Avenue of the Fountains, would we ever think of expanding cameras into other areas? I know the Avenue of the Fountains, that park is a park also, so I wondered about that.
We can certainly, Madam Mayor, take anything into consideration, direction from the mayor and council or others that are concerned. We can certainly visit those as we move forward with this, yes.
Justin, you want to also kind of report that we did do, was it a year ago, we did the plaza, the Centennial Plaza?
It was last year and the year before we added new cameras to the Library Event Circle or the Centennial Plaza, and also cameras that covered the portion of the parking lot adjacent to and including the community garden.
Oh, good, okay, thank you. Any other questions? Somebody like to make a motion, please?
Somebody makes a motion. Move forward.
I'll make a motion to approve the cooperative purchasing agreement 2020-003 as outlined in the data.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
You're welcome.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next item is the sculpture titled Fountain of Light. Are you going to take that, Grady?
Yes, just briefly. So, Mayor and Council, before you is a request consideration for the sculpture Fountain of Light. You recall that this was before you probably over a year ago, maybe almost 18 months ago. And at that time, the council was not really enamored with the location. In fact, the location at the time was proposed to be at the end of the Avenue of the Fountains, right at Saguaro. The council at the time, while they generally agreed that they liked the sculpture project, they had directed the artist and the Public Art Committee to find another location, and when they found that, to come back, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Community Services Director, who has a brief report on this, and then we also have the chair or co-chair, Carol from the Public Art Committee, if you have any questions of her as well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just to give a brief overview, I'm going to kind of go through a series of maps here to give you some sense of where we're talking about this evening. And then, to your point, I am going to ask Co-Chair Carol of the Public Art Committee to join us, as well as the artist himself. Brian Shader is here. And if you haven't noticed, we do have a rendering, a model of the piece here, too, to kind of give you a little bit of an idea. So the piece is entitled Fountain of Light. We're going to be reviewing and discussing that tonight. It is designed. This is the rendering for it. It is a large piece. It is roughly 50 feet tall. It has a footprint diameter of somewhere between 14 to 18 feet. That is still pending engineering design, but it's no small thing. The dimensions overall, this gives you an idea, like I said, 14 to 18 feet in diameter for the foundation, which reaches roughly 5 to 7 feet tall. And then the actual sculpture will begin somewhere around 4x4 and taper near the top, leaving the complete project somewhere roughly 50 feet tall, just to give you an idea. The proposed location for tonight's discussion is on the western end of the avenue, denoted here in the red circle. Is essentially outside of the town hall doors. So if you head out town hall out to the avenue, it's in the grassy area there. So adjacent to Avenue of the Fountains. If we zoom out a little bit, this gives you a little bit better perspective. Town hall's there on the lower right, the lower left, with the circle there, and it kind of gives you an idea of where in perspective with the rest of the park. The reason this space was recommended by the artist and the Public Art Committee is it has many advantages, one of which is the existing power that's there on the avenue, and there doesn't need to be an additional installation. There is an existing breaker there that we can use with the pieces already on the avenue, and it can be timered so that the power is on and off with the rest of the lighting on the avenue. Additionally, you can notice it'll have minimal pathway disturbance, i.e. there's a big great grassy spot that can accommodate most of this piece. So there's not a whole lot of disturbance that has to happen, which are both very, very positive things. The one of the other locations, I did have some questions about previous locations. This was reviewed back in December of 2017. A number of our council are new since that time. So just so we have a quick overview of what has been considered and where we've been with this discussion. One location, the original location, was the eastern end of the avenue, or commonly known as the Sharon Morgan Plaza, if you're familiar with that. It's down there at the end of Saguaro, adjacent to the park. The original location did require a new layout of the existing fountains, and as well as potential tree removal. So there was quite a bit of extensive work required for that. There was discussion, and that location was denied by the previous council. Other locations considered were the Shea and Fountain Hills Boulevard intersection. This one had concerns raised due to the speed of traffic on Shea Boulevard, i.e. there's gawking. We want people to stop and slow down and look at it, hopefully take pictures. It really doesn't accommodate that when you're moving at 50, 60 miles an hour through that area. There's also not parking. There's nowhere to pull over to accommodate that, so folks can't get out and take those photos. So that idea was also dismissed. Lastly, there was a consideration for the La Montana roundabout. I'll call it the future La Montana roundabout. One of the biggest drawbacks of this space was just timing, that we don't even have a conceptual rendering yet of what that will look like or when that project will be completed. So that really puts the timing in jeopardy for this project. Additionally, there is additional questions about pedestrian access, meaning we want folks to be able to go up to the piece and interact with the piece, and getting there from across the roundabout may be hazardous. So there was considerations there as well. What we're going to be talking about, and really the discussion tonight, is that, again, the piece itself was approved in December of 2017, but we're really talking about location. And the key for location is that the Public Art Committee would like to begin fundraising for this piece, but they can't do that until they know where it's going to go. I think it should be noted, too, that this piece is intended to be 100% fundraised, that it is not intended to rely on funding from the town or from the public art funds that we have under the town. To note, it's expected to be roughly $125,000 for the art itself, and then an additional $25,000 for the base design and engineering specs for that. So they do need to get a move on if they're going to raise those that level of funding. They're also looking to raise additional funding over and above that number to donate to the public art funds for maintenance of the piece. And then ideally the installation of the piece would coincide with the 50th anniversary celebration of the fountain next year. So that is the proposed timeline. Again, we have the artist here tonight. We also have the Public Art Committee to answer questions or any details that you might like to know.
Anybody have any questions for Rachel? Councilman?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I know you don't have an exact number, but I assume like the irrigation adjustments and the power access, it's going to be relatively minor as far as the town expense?
Yes. That the Public Art Committee, as well as the artist, met with myself. We met with park staff as well as Public Works to really evaluate it to make sure that we were anticipating any and all angles, and this does seem to have the most minimal impact on any type of town costs.
Councilman?
Yeah, first, let me start with a positive, and that is to compliment the Arts Council. They've done a tremendous job over the years, and I know it's appreciated by the citizens. We have, I don't know, I lose track, 130, 40, 50 sculptures, probably more per capita than any town or city in America, and that's quite an achievement. Having said that, I have some serious difficulty with at least the location of the Tower of Light. I'm on the board of the group that is trying to build a dark skies center and observatory. This seems very incongruous with what it is we're trying to achieve. Overall, I don't think it makes sense for Fountain Hills. That's my personal, we're one of, 20 towns in the world, I believe, that is a dark skies community. We're getting calls from around the country for people who want to emulate what's been done here. I think this just flies in the face of all of the effort that was put in by citizens to get this designated as a the dark sky community. I note it's going to be 50 feet tall. I believe Park Place is only a little bit higher than that,
If that.
if that. So we're talking about a really high sculpture. I want to read section, and this is a real concern. Section 8.03C of our outdoor building or landscape illumination policy. The unshielded outdoor illumination of any building, landscaping, signage, or other purpose is prohibited except with light fixtures of less than 1,125 lumens. The combined outdoor unshielded lighting shall not exceed 1,125 lumens within a 25-foot radius. All illumination shall be so arranged as not to shine upon or reflect onto adjoining properties. Well, clearly, a 50-foot high tower is going to illuminate other properties. But more important than that is that I've been told that 1,125 lumens is the equivalent of a 75-watt incandescent bulb. So how do you get around that? This is not going to have a 75-watt bulb in it. And so I have real concerns about having this tower in Fountain Hills, frankly, but I clearly don't want it that close to an observatory because it would create tremendous problems.
If I might, and I don't know the answer to those questions, but I would like to ask our artist to come forward who might be able to talk more about that, because I do know that the dark skies was a consideration in developing this piece. Brian, do you have any more details on that?
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council.
Hi.
Yes, we discussed this at quite length concerning the dark skies qualifications and things necessary. I believe that that there wouldn't be an issue with adhering to any of those ordinances. If I may, I can turn on the lights that are in the model here. We can get a feel, if you can dim the house lights, of what it and this is, again, only a model, and these are some 12-volt, low voltage LED lights. Unfortunately, you guys can't see from your side that the light just transmits out the glass. It doesn't break away from the structure itself. So, personally, I don't think there would be any issue at all, but that's.
Thank you.
I'm not really qualified. I'm not a lighting engineer, so I really don't know that information.
Councilman?
Sir, when it's lit, well, first of all, 50 feet high. Is all of the glass going to be lit up? I assume it would.
So the lighting design is in the base of the piece. Glass has the ability to transmit light, so any light that shines on the bottom of each individual pane of glass will carry up the full length of the pane of glass.
And
it will become dimmer and dimmer as it goes higher.
any idea what the maximum lumens would be on that?
We didn't engineer the lighting or do anything.
Because if I'm correct, and if this ordinance is correct, then I think the lighting would be a significant problem at 1,125 lumens. But that's something that can be looked into.
Now, that could possibly be, if that's the ordinance, I imagine it could be engineered with that maximum amount in each pane of glass, or in each section of glass beneath it, so that the minimal amount of light would be transmitting through each little section of glass. It doesn't break away from the glass at all. Light is carried inside the glass. It's reflected from all surfaces of the glass, so it's not going to glow. And I had one more comment. I went ahead and I thought that we might have a discussion on the scope of the project, so I took the liberty to make up a few visuals for everyone. And this is showing the Frank Lloyd Wright spire. You know, that's with my mock-up next to it. So what this visual will show you is that the spire at Frank Lloyd Wright is 2.5 times as tall and 5 times as wide as the fountain piece. So that kind of gets you a feel of what that piece, everybody knows what that piece looks like from Frank Lloyd Wright Boulevard. So you can imagine somewhat of what this piece would look like being 2.5 times smaller and 5 times smaller in
Thank you.
But Mayor, after other council members have had an opportunity, I'm going to ask Joe Bill if he would come forward. Joe and Nancy Bill.
Yeah, they probably have speaker
architects,
cards.
The whole Dark Skies, I don't think they do.
Oh, okay.
The whole Dark Skies effort.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
I have a quick question. That section at the bottom that doesn't have the glass, if it is extended 50 feet high, how tall would that section be where there isn't glass, where the light has to go through, approximately? I'm guessing from where I'm sitting, but...
Well, actually, the glass does drop down to within a couple inches from the bottom.
On the other side, because I
Yeah,
can't really see that.
It
Okay.
twists around. So,
All right. Okay, thank you.
About 12 to 14 feet is
When
what
it's extended?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
due to public safety issues, we didn't want glass too close to the ground for people to more easily hit it with rocks.
Councilman Charno?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the top, is it going to be open where there will actually be light, protruding
Yeah,
from
it's
it?
a cylinder, so yeah, there could potentially be some emission of light out the very top of it. But if the lighting is designed properly, it'll be mostly hitting the bottom edges of the glass that overlaps the interior of the structure.
So, I mean, artistically or engineering-wise, could something be done at the top to prevent it from leaking out?
Actually, it wasn't designed this way, but if, with the way LEDs are made now, I imagine that we could use some very unobtrusive LED lighting at the bottom of each section rather than a large light in the bottom. And that's what would have come into play once we began the engineering process on the whole project. And then there would be very, very little light coming out the very top because it would just be transmitting through the glass itself. If that makes sense.
Anybody else? Councilman?
Thank you. This question, if I could I ask Randy to come up? Randy, Harold, please. I personally, as I did in 2017, I like this project.
Did you say Randy Harold?
I'd ask for Randy. I'm going to ask Randy Harold to his input. He knows more about the streets of Fountain Hills. I'm not set on making this a downtown feature at all. I think that the feature is way too pretty. I know we've had the conversation about having it where people could stand up and walk up to it and admire it. I don't know that very many people stop in Scottsdale and Frank Lloyd Wright to admire that. But Randy, what is the busiest intersection in Fountain Hills?
Mayor, Councilman, that would be Shea and Palisades.
Shea and Palisades. Thank you, Randy. That's all I wanted. I would have guessed that 1,000 times over, but I would like, I would also ask the Bills, since they are the dark sky experts, if we couldn't possibly rethink this a little bit and take it out of downtown. I just think it's way too stunning and way too pretty to not have everybody that drives up and down Shea and to see it. I just think it's a stunning piece of art.
Frankly, Mr. Brown, I'd like to do a small one for here and a larger one out there.
Well, we'll work on. Let's get the first one in first.
I'm Carol with the Public Art Committee. I'm co-chair with Jenny Willengood, and we've been working with the piece that we're talking about, Fountain of Light, for a couple of years, making sure that we would be ready for the 50th anniversary and be able to commemorate the town with a beautiful sculpture. And with all of the plans that were coming in for downtown and getting in our new apartments and seeing the businesses remodel and everything, we thought it would be an outstanding presentation of public art. One of the things that we did work with in working with the sculptor, and Brian is the one who talked to the Dark Skies people and said that we would make sure that it complied. We don't want to do anything to get in the way of that. And the way he's designed it and the way he explained it, we can be quite compliant with their requirements, whatever that may be. The other thing that I'd like to read a little section out of the public art collection, and that is in our mission to promote a rich, diverse, and stimulating cultural environment that enriches the lives of the town residents. We certainly have a lot of visitors, and further establishes the town's identity with the fountain. So they're meant to work together on both sides of the avenue, so that when people are here, they're just not going to the Saguaro location, they're walking up the avenue and possibly shopping in the new shops that we'll be getting in, and the people who are living downtown, and actually begin to start that economic development with a fine piece of art. So from the art committee's perspective, we thought the artwork that needs to be acquired for our town should reflect the highest aesthetic standards. To be able to, when we acquire the artwork and accept it into the collection, it should be appropriate in scale. I believe that the fountain doesn't top either of the couple of buildings that are around here, so that I think that it does blend into what we're doing. It's appropriate in scale, its context and its location be relevant to culture, historical, and relevant environmental context of Fountain Hills. And I think that when we started working on this again, because we've had the Fountain of Light approved for a long time, and it's been quite tossed around town in different locations and mentioned in different locations, which again it would be beautiful in. But the most ideal site from the Public Art Committee is to bring it into downtown to make a major statement to all those who are coming here, all those who are thinking about doing business here, and bringing it into our environment. So that's from the Public Art Committee.
Thank you.
Any other questions there?
Anybody have any questions for Carol? Oh, Councilman? No?
I don't have a question.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna, yeah, thanks. Thank you, Carol. Did we have any speaker cards on this?
We had speaker cards from Mr. Shader and Ms. Carroll, so.
Okay.
And then we had 2 written comment cards in opposition.
Okay, thank you. So would the Bills or Joe or Nancy, if you'd like to come up and talk to us, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Joe Bill, Mayor Dickey, council members. We just found out about this a couple hours ago, and somehow it got to our 2 boards, the Fountain Hills Dark Sky Association Board and our International Dark Sky Discovery Center Board. So as you can imagine, the emails started flying, with a lot of people not quite understanding what this project is all about. I think, first of all, I just want to say I want to applaud the people who are trying to do great things for this community. We all are trying to do that. I think what's critical is that we don't work at cross purposes. And one of the concerns is that since the council that approved the concept but not the location, that happened before we were designated as a dark sky community. Now we're a dark sky community, and it's a little hard to potentially explain to the International Dark Sky Association that we're putting up a 50-foot tall column of, or fountain of light. That is probably going to be incongruous when I'm working with them to have their annual conference held here in Fountain Hills, working with ASU, which is going very well, I might add. They're excited because we are a dark sky community, because it's relatively dark here. They're particularly interested in the observatory. And just so you understand how observatories work, when a light emits a glow, we all can see that with our naked eye. If you multiply that by 1,000, that's what the telescope sees. So if the telescope is aimed anywhere toward a pillar of light that's above Town Hall, it kind of blocks out a huge portion of the sky. So yes, there are concerns. We have to express those concerns because we're not sure if the engineering has been done to ensure that it's not real bright. 75-watt bulb for the entire structure, not each panel, is what the current ordinance would allow. So bottom line is, if it can be done with the equivalent of a 75-watt incandescent bulb, then it meets the requirements of the ordinance. It meets the requirements of IDA as well, and we would have no objection to that. So it's just, I think, maybe it's something we don't fully understand what's going to go up there, and we're trying to protect what we are trying to do for this community, because when we get that Dark Sky Discovery Center built, that is going to get an amazing amount of international recognition. So I just wanted to make sure the council understands what the issue is and maybe figure out a path forward.
Thank you. Joe, any questions? Yes, Councilman?
Joe, you probably can't answer this, but let me state it as a concern. We don't know whether or not the Tower of Light would require us to reposition in some way the observatory. We're just about, we've paid for this, we're just about to get the final renderings of this whole project. It has not been an easy situation. And I would hope that I would hope that we don't have to start over again with architectural renderings, because something like the observatory has to be repositioned in some way.
I think I'm not being inaccurate by saying it jeopardizes some things that we are doing. And the problem is I can't say that for sure because we don't know the exact engineering of the sculpture in terms of exactly how much light it would emit. But there is concern that without that data, to put something up like that and find out later, it's like, ooh, we've got a real big problem here. And that's what we are trying to avoid. So.
Thank you. Councilman?
Well, I was here for this presentation in 2017, and we liked the sculpture, we liked the design, and it really ties in with the fountain. I do respect your concerns, though, with this observatory, which I hope you're successful with raising the funds to build, and the Art Council needs to raise $125,000 for this. So I think they're going to be butting heads in regards to raising money, number one. However, Councilman Brown, you were thinking exactly what I was thinking in regards to the placement of this. We've got the traffic counts on Shea. We want to attract people to the downtown area. This should be placed on Shea in an area where it makes sense. I think with Fort McDowell Casino and their investment in what they're doing over at that casino, that Beeline Highway in Shea is going to get busier and busier. And if that could be something that is a showpiece as you're coming into Fountain Hills to attract people, to let them know we have what at one time was the largest fountain in the world, or the largest fountain west of the Mississippi, or however they marketed originally, this would be a great piece on Shea coming into Fountain Hills from Beeline. And if we can design a plaza there that this was the showpiece, that would be amazing.
Any other questions? Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I kind of have mixed emotions on that. I understand the argument on Shea Boulevard, but on the other hand, it seems like parties involved were wanting to concentrate on the downtown and have people stop and take pictures of it and admire it. And yeah, maybe we could do some kind of plaza, but you still have to account for parking and that kind of thing. I mean, to me, that's a much larger project and more money involved. I mean, I like the idea what Mrs. Carroll was talking about as far as people come to see the real fountain, and hopefully they spend some time here and shop more, and having this up on this end I think would help that whole arrangement. And the other thing I was wondering with the 75 watts or whatever, if we use LEDs, I mean, do we know how many LEDs we could use in equivalent? We probably don't know that number, but if we approve this with the stipulation that it has to meet the dark sky ordinance, I don't know what other objections there could be, because it meets the ordinance. And it seems to me the fountain itself lit up and all the controversial lights that were installed around the park years ago, I mean, would that preclude the observatory from looking toward the east? I mean, it just seems, you know, I mean, I understand the argument. I'm just having kind of hard time differentiating that.
No, we're still discussing. Sorry, Councilman Tullis?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to clarify and make sure I wasn't misunderstood. I'm not thinking we're putting a plaza with parking on Shea, and I'm thinking we're putting something that's a nice fountain, welcome to Fountain Hills, and this is what they see, and immediately, you know, we're in the age of technology. People look at that, they probably Google, what is that all about, if they aren't familiar with Fountain Hills, and that could be a showpiece down there. And if it's on the Fort McDowell land, maybe we can make it like the Luxor, and it could be a shooting light in the sky, and say, welcome to Fountain Hills, spend your money here.
Thank you, Councilman. I have a couple of questions, or just things to bring up. The ordinance aspect of it, there's obviously some confusion of whether it's per pane or whatever, but saying that it would comply with dark skies, we don't know what that looks like, but there's obviously a difference of opinion, if nothing else, on what that is. Alan, I've not, you know, I like that we have a lot of artwork here. I think Loveland, Colorado probably has a little bit more than in the sculpture area, but I like that. I like that we do that, and of course, these things are donated. You know, I don't know if we're still talking about the scale of the project, possibility of it, like you just said, you know, maybe something smaller here, because there's a lot of balance to this. I mean, some of the stuff that Art and then that Mike has said about this being a downtown and a thing to look at, that's appealing. But the idea of almost a monument coming into Fountain Hills is really appealing. Two other things about that, though, if it was something like that, I think our public art has some requirements about access, that people can see it and look at it, and there's plaques that give people credit for donating to it, so that might not go totally with the landmark kind of a thing. So I think there's a lot of maybe more conversation that needs to happen, and I don't know whether we how that would look, and maybe I could use some staff guidance.
Well,
and there she is.
Lots of luck.
Right, exactly. It does seem that there's still quite a few questions, and it's some new information that was not part of the discussion originally in 2017. I was just, Carol was just chatting, and we agree that there needs to be some more discussion, probably from the dark skies perspective. Is it an option to potentially table tonight's discussion to come back once there's been that level of communication to make sure that everybody's sort of operating on the same page?
I'll make that motion.
Yep, go ahead.
Make a motion, we table
I'm
this
sorry,
discussion.
did you want to say
I do have one other question.
Okay,
for the artist.
Councilman Brown?
For the artist,
Okay.
please.
Brian, just one more, please.
So Brian, how much work will it be to get together with an engineer and see what we can do as far as integrating the lighting system to this and clearly staying within the limits of the dark sky? And the second thing is, in the event that it goes on the avenue, would you be willing to, since this is not constructed, would you be willing to build it no higher than the top of Town Hall? I think that's 35 feet.
Very close to
Yeah,
considered parapets.
35, 36 feet, and that might be a reasonable solution to the dark sky, as well as a reasonable solution for the art community. 50 feet's rather grandeur. If we could talk about scaling it back a little bit and appeasing both the dark sky and the art community, I would like to think we could do that. How much work would it be to engineer something like that?
Yeah, to your first question about the engineering, I'm sure that would be rather quick. I could create some test blocks that would be of the same scale as the actual piece to see what the light transmission is, and I'm sure they can calculate all of that. And then yeah, I can come back with those figures. As far as scaling it down, I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to moving it either. Just after looking around and assessing all the potential locations and having talked at length with Grady and other people about Centennial Circle, we've kind of moved it around and moved it around and moved it around. And we've actually come back to my two favorite places. My number one spot was at the head of the avenue so that people would also look this direction towards the merchants. But this is sort of a bookend on the opposite end, so it's my second choice. I didn't think Centennial Circle was really all that appropriate just because it was such a stark area. And a glass and bronze patinaed piece fits better in a garden setting. So the greenery around it would make it much more beautiful than being in the concrete of Centennial Circle. So.
Councilman?
Yeah, I just want
Well, we're still talking.
Yeah, I just want to make this comment before it's tabled, because once it's tabled, I can't make the comment. I would hope the motion to table includes asking the Arts Council to take one more look at the Shea location. I find that very appealing, Shea and Saguaro. I think that would be worth taking another look at, and it could be looked at in two ways. One, the 50-foot, and the other, a smaller one.
Thank you for that. Again, just last 2 cents. I do like the idea of a scaled-down version downtown where people can see it. That would comply with the way the public art ordinance is written right now. Otherwise, I think we'd have to make some other changes if we did do the Shea area. Carol? I think.
Yes, I think the public art
Sorry.
would approve a little smaller one so that it could be at the height of the building. I think it would stay with the meaning of the sculpture. I think it stays with everything that we're looking at. And the lighting is totally, we'll build an engineering, what do they call that has the light?
A study or an analysis.
Yeah, we'll do an analysis really quickly on the different size of lighting so that we can comply, and you can see that we are able to build some filters on top of that to be able to keep the lighting from dispersing all over. I think you'll be surprised. It's not as bright as you might think.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a motion to postpone then from someone?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we table this and
Postpone, I think.
we request the Arts Council to discuss the location, the size, and also evaluate whether this or a duplicate of this or a larger piece of this could be incorporated down Shea, Beeline Shea, coming into Fountain Hills as a welcome to Fountain Hills piece.
Wait, thank you. Before someone seconds it, Aaron, could you tell us why we would want to postpone rather than table? Or Liz,
Looks like Liz can.
Can you please explain it to me?
To table means we would have to bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay.
And according to parliamentary procedure, so
Thank you.
postponing it will allow it to come back when everything has been settled.
How much time do you need?
It takes 8 months.
No, not to build it, to come back to the council.
Oh.
With what you've requested, we wouldn't have.
We could get it back really quickly.
Get it back by the next meeting.
Could I suggest that we just say postpone, that'll cover us, because our next meeting is the
Big one.
daybreak meeting, so.
Postpone,
We
make
might
a motion, we
wanna- Yeah, put it
postpone.
one more meeting out.
Thank you.
Art, if we could, I'd like to incorporate all three of the parties, the artist, the Dark Sky Committee, as well as the Arts Committee. And so to shorten our meetings, to make sure all three, because the Arts Committee and the Dark Sky Committee are two of the most important parts of our town.
Yes.
And I would like them to clearly work together to where there is no question when it comes back to us as to what we're actually looking at.
We will work.
Okay.
Thank you. So,
So the motion is to postpone.
Thank
To
you.
ask the Arts Council and the Dark Skies Council, their boards, to get together and come back at a later date with the answers to our concerns regarding the height, the lighting, and also the possibilities of having something on Shea welcoming peace in Fountain Hills.
Thank you.
And we have a second,
Can I have a
please.
second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded to postpone. Can I please have a vote? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all. We really appreciate it very much. Next, we have a public hearing and consideration of draft changes to the land use analysis and the IIP. Great.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, we have had development fees for a number of years. The purpose of development fees is that that growth pays for growth. So as a result of, as you have new subdivisions being built and new people moving into town, that in it the infrastructure needs that are required to accommodate the growth, that they are actually paid for by the folks that are causing the impact to the community. We have with us tonight a gentleman by the name of Ben Griffin. He is with Tischler Bies. Tischler Bies is considered the preeminent development impact fee company in the country. In fact, Arizona and California have probably led the development impact fee uses since in California Prop 13 came about, and in Arizona with our high growth. A number of cities started looking to development impact fees in the 1980s to try to build infrastructure and pass those costs on to development. So as part of this, we've got a very long and lengthy process that we're going to have to go through, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Griffin, who's going to go ahead and introduce you to that process, but also kind of walk you through the land use analysis and infrastructure implementation plan, which basically is required to do that first before you start determining what those fees need to be. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Griffin.
I'm going to start the public hearing first because it all comes under the same. So we're in a public hearing. Thanks.
All right, Mayor, Council, thanks for having me tonight. So, as Grady said, really what we're looking at tonight is going to be the land use assumptions and the IIP. Those are the first two components that are required by Arizona legislation on impact fees. Before we get into that, I'll give just a 6 or 7 slide refresher course on development fees for any of you who have done this before, and then for those of you who haven't, it'll sort of serve as an impact fee 101 to bring you up to speed. So in Arizona, you are required to have 3 documents with your impact fees. The first is the land use assumptions. So it's basically looking at 10 years of development. So we say this is where you are today, and based on projections, this is where we think you'll be over the next 10 years. Essentially saying you're going to grow by this much, so we prove demand for additional facilities. The next component is the infrastructure improvement plan. Essentially, that's the list of projects. So what do you need over the next 10 years to serve future development? And then the last component is the actual development fee report, which essentially lists the development fees calculated in combination of the land use assumptions and the IIP. So, one thing you want to think about when you're thinking about impact fees is level of service. So you want to make sure that you're not charging future development for a higher level of service than existing development receives. As I said, tonight we're looking at land use assumptions and IIP. Once you have your public hearing, which is tonight, and then adoption of this, then you can actually move on to the development fees. With that, you also have a public hearing, and then you can adopt that. Why development fees? Well, as you know, as you grow, you need additional facilities to serve future development. So this is a way to essentially say, these are the improvements we need, and this is how much it's going to cost, and this is what we should charge future development. It's much easier than doing a development agreement for every single component of infrastructure that you need. You can talk to some of the cities in the Western Valley who use development agreements more often, and that just brings up a lot of headaches that just going with development fees sort of goes around that. So eligible costs. You can include facilities and improvements required to serve new development, but you cannot include maintenance, repairs, rehab, anything like that in your development fees. If you have excess capacity in your fees or in your facilities, then you can have future development buy into that excess capacity. Now, you can't include anything that is going to correct an existing deficiency unless you have identified some sort of funding mechanism outside of the impact fees that would essentially fix that and raise your level of service. If you didn't do that, then essentially you would be charging future development for a higher level of service. So this last one, there's sort of a caveat. It's not allowed unless you have basically the general fund or existing development raise that level of service. All right, so conceptual impact fee calculation. With this, we're looking at parks as the example. So what we're saying is, if you have 2.5 persons per dwelling unit, and you want to be at 5 acres per 1,000 persons, and that costs $100,000 per acre, then you would charge $1,250 per dwelling unit. All right, so we'll quickly talk about the 3 fee methodologies. The first is a buy-in approach, where essentially we're saying you have this infrastructure, there's excess capacity, we want to buy into that. So you charge future development for their share of that excess capacity. Next up, the incremental expansion methodology, where you say we're happy with our level of service today, we want to maintain that going forward. So what does it cost us to replicate that? So if we want to add an acre of parkland, if we want to add 1,000 square feet of some sort of facility, what does that cost us going forward? And then the final methodology is a plan-based approach, where we say, we've got these specific projects. Maybe it's in our CIP, maybe it's in our master plan. We want to build them, so how do we get there? What is existing development share? What is future development share of that? So we sort of balance between the needs of the community and these methodologies. And so if you have a very well-defined CIP or a master plan that says we have got to have these specific projects, then maybe a plan-based approach makes sense. If you don't, then a lot of times we'll go to an incremental expansion methodology, where we say, hey, these are the similar improvements that you have today, and if we maintain that going forward, this is what you would need to maintain that. Also have to look at credits. So site-specific credits, that would be if you say we need, we're going to plan some sort of park improvements on this side of town, and a developer comes in and actually builds those park improvements, then the developer would get a credit for that. So you just wouldn't charge that component to the developer. Next, debt service credits. So we want to make sure that we're not charging future development twice. So once through the impact fee and once through any sort of debt service. So we would make sure that we don't, or we basically provide a credit for that debt service to offset the impact fee. And then also any dedicated revenue. So property tax, sales tax, gas tax, anything like that that would be generated by future development. The Arizona legislation says you have to project any development or any non-development fee revenues and basically prove that you're not going to use those for the same improvements that you would use the development fees to fund. All right, so before we get into the land use assumptions, any questions on impact fee basics, any of the methodologies? Okay, go ahead. And feel free to interrupt me whenever. I won't be offended.
Excuse me, I'm not really a question, but just to set the table again on what development fees are for, because we do have a lot of discussion about when people move into town, that it's, to fill, which I never like this phrase, but to fill our coffers, and not people come in, it fills our coffers, but this is exactly showing that more people coming, we want them to come, but it also does have a cost to the town, so that this it's just a way to present that conversation a little bit, to show that there's an established, recognized statewide, that when we have more folks living in town who are welcome to do that, that they do, as far as the town is concerned, we need to absorb some costs, and this is to help offset that.
Correct.
Thank you.
May I?
Do you have, I know you said you had a lot, but I wasn't sure if you meant now.
I don't have a lot, but I've got
Okay.
some questions. I'm going to start with Grady and Aaron. Several years ago, our development fee was $6,700, and the Home Builders Association got together with the legislators, and when the smoke cleared, our $6,700 for a single family or a multi-family unit came down to $1,601. And the commercial end of it ended up being at 24 cents a square foot. And has the law changed?
I don't believe so, but we have to do updates to our development impact fee
that's where-
methodology. I mean, so the last time we did this, what I call the land use analysis, and which is the basis of how you set your fees, and then also the infrastructure improvement plan or implementation plan. It's been many, many years, and as you know, like when we built the fire station, remember the difference between what that cost versus what it was anticipated and what we collected the fees for? It was $600,000 more to build a fire station than what we had collected the fees at that time.
That's our fault.
Yeah, because we waited on when we went to go build.
Well, I wouldn't go that far either. It's
Okay.
our fault because we didn't take charge of the construction.
Yeah, okay,
So-
but to your point, to the best of my knowledge, nothing has really changed with the law. In fact, he's really outlined a really good job, I think, of outlining the very difficult process that cities and towns have to go through to make even adjustments anymore.
Well, that's fine, and I agree with all that, and I appreciate your efforts. But if we're going to go through all of this and then have the state come back and say, you can't do that, what are you guys thinking about?
No, I can tell you cities and towns have continued to make updates and changes to their development impact fees around the valley.
Okay.
So they haven't, like, first of all, I believe it's only limited to a set period of time, correct?
Right, and your 2014 fee study, that was the first fee study under the new act, and it was a big change from the pre-2014 fees. There were a lot of limitations. You know, you couldn't go over 30 acres of parkland. You couldn't include general government facilities anymore. So there were a lot of restrictions, and that's why you saw a big decrease on a lot of fees statewide.
And has that law changed?
It has not. But, you know, we're looking at, you know, what is, you know, what can we do within the law? And, you know, last time we only looked at, or the consulting firm who did your current study, you know, looked at fire and parks. I do believe they looked at some other components, but maybe those weren't adopted. But, you know, they looked at, you know, the same fee components that we're looking at, but now we can maybe justify those a little bit better now that we're, you know, a few years removed from the law and everyone's not just rushing to very quickly adopt that.
There are going to be a few things that you're going to see that we don't have currently, that we may have had or other cities have, and that is we don't, in our current model right now, we do not collect for streets. Okay, and a lot of that is because, you know, the developers frequently put in the infrastructure for the streets. However, as you're going to hear, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but we do have the ability to collect for like Shea and the widening of Shea and some other streets that we have identified in this plan where Future Growth is going to pay their pro rata share of that, but not all of the widening costs associated with it. Now, you know, I don't know if this is the appropriate time for that, but that's an example where we are making changes, and that's currently not in, we're not collecting any fees for that right now. So,
And we aren't collecting any fees because the state legislature would not allow us to collect those fees.
no, that's not my
so?
understanding, no.
So we just arbitrarily dropped that? I mean, I was the one that made the motion to increase the fees to $6,700, and I understand all this, but the town has changed dramatically because every new development that people are moving into, Eagles Nest, and Fire Rock and Otero Canyon, are all private streets. And so I really struggle with the infrastructure capacity is essential to accommodate new development. Well, all the new development that is happening and has happened in the town of Fountain Hills over the last 15 years, all private development. And so I'm struggling asking, I'm a builder, struggling asking one of my clients to come up with another $5,500 for streets when they're already living and paying for streets that they live in. Now, granted, they might drive on the streets of Fountain Hills, granted, but why is it fair for them to pay when nobody else in town pays to help take care of our own streets? That's item number one. And then I need some explanation. Excess capacity in existing facilities. This is eligible costs. Excess capacity. What is an excess capacity in an existing facility?
So, for example, say you built a fire station, and it's a 3-bay fire station. You're only using 2 bays right now, but as you grow, you'll need to acquire an additional apparatus. So you could have future development buy into their share of that bay that's not being used today.
And I'll give you an example. This is pretty common. When I've worked in other cities, we had basically street widening where we went ahead. It was cheaper to go ahead and take care of that now, like maybe in the down economy, to go ahead and take care of it now. But there would be buy-in fees for future development along that area. So we might have gone from a 2-lane to a 3-lane in each direction. And so as those areas started doing infill, there were buy-in fees for them to go ahead and pay their pro rata share for that improvement. It made sense to go ahead and pay for that on the front end for the city to do that. But as those future developments occurred, then they were able to get them to pay these, what I call buy-in fees. So that's another way of doing that, extra capacity.
And on your fee methodologies, what is square feet per student station?
That actually should not even be in there, because in Arizona you don't do school impact fees, but in the rest of the country where you do.
I saw that and what is that? Okay, yeah. I appreciate that. Just a couple more here. Explain current levels of service versus existing levels of service. This is under fee methodology considerations. You have current LOS versus existing LOS, or is that not the same thing?
Someone else in our office prepared this, so I think it should say current versus planned. That's probably what it should say. Yes.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Yeah. I'm just trying to understand what's being presented.
Right.
Yeah. So it should be current versus planned. So some communities say, hey, we plan to be at 5 acres per 1,000 on parks, but we're really at 3.5. So that's just a sort of a segue to go into, hey, you can either do an incremental expansion where you maintain this 3.5, or you come up with some other sort of funding source where you raise it to 5 acres per 1,000, and then you can charge your fee based on that 5 per 1,000.
Thank you.
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. All right, so this is very dense material. I read your report twice, and so don't take offense to any of my questions. I just want to understand better. So you just said that this is based on an assumption on 10-year growth, correct? So it sounds to me like from the answers you just gave, you didn't do the previous report. Was that 2014?
Right. That was by another firm.
Your company didn't do it, right?
Right.
And that was just for fire and parks. Do you know if the prediction from the 2014 report on growth, or whatever they had to base their assumptions on, was accurate, or was it way off, or do you know?
I'm not sure, but if they used MAG's old projections, so the 2010 instead of the 2015, those were notoriously off because of the slowdown. So pretty much anything prior to this, if you were using MAG projections, just wasn't quite meeting the growth projections because of the recession. But MAG's 2015 release is much more accurate than previous releases.
Vice Mayor, if I may, when we were getting kind of audited, because then when you kind of start with these things, you have to keep checking on it because the state is really strict with it. One of the things that I think I recall is that we had looked at the state trust land at that time as this possibility. So any of the looking ahead saying, oh, we are going to need more police up because of up there, or we were going to put 2 parks up there, but we didn't get penalized or whatever the word is for not fulfilling that because of the fact that that all fell through. They weren't going to do the state trust land, so it wasn't like we were trying to inflate what was going to happen. It's what we thought was going to happen in 10 years. And there are checkpoints before you get to the next 10 points that see how well you're doing with what you predicted. Thanks.
Yeah, you have to update every 5 years. So if anything's too far off, you're going to hit 5 years and have to update it anyway.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking some of these questions is the bottom line for me, if I'm reading this correctly, and I know you're going to get to this, is this jumps quite a bit for us and what our ask is based on some of these assumptions. And so that's why I'm asking some of the questions. And I'm sure I'll have more as we go along, but I'm the new person kind of on the block, and so some of these things may not make as much sense to me as others, but it does give me concern with the big jump, and that's why I'm asking some of the questions. And again, I'm a litigator, so when I'm in front of a jury, I make it real simple. So I'm trying to understand it from a perspective. I don't know these terminologies or this actual topic like a builder would. So.
Councilman Charnow?
So just real quick, could you summarize as far as the data and the methodology and the research? Was it, MAG and a lot of outside sources, or mostly town staff, or your own staff, or how do you compile all that?
It's actually a combination of everything. So we did look at, and I'm going to butcher the name of this, the annual housing report. We've looked at the last couple of years of that to make sure that our base year assumptions are correct. So, how many housing units do you have? What's your population? What sort of non-residential development do you have? And then we used MAG to actually project that going forward to say, what makes sense? How many housing units do we think will actually add each year? How many jobs would we add, which would then generate the need for additional floor area? And then, we just, to Sherbice, we take our expertise in Arizona and, in the Valley and say, hey, does this actually make sense? Do we think that Fountain Hills will actually grow by this much? What are some of the broader trends for the Valley on non-residential development?
To Dennis's point a little bit, the changes, this whole thing that we're going through, this exercise, is something that was mandated by the state of Arizona because cities were determining on their own what they thought impact would be from development. Of course, during plenty of times when there's a lot going on, then the cities were trying to catch up. But the state felt, I think, in some cases that some of the cities were either abusing it or just not figuring it out correctly. So this whole thing came about, which is really strict, which did take away some of the open space that we were allowed to have development fees for. And just to get back to the street part, I understand, the frustration with a private street, but then someone like me and you who've been here when we paid property taxes for streets that everybody's using now. So I think that there's a little bit of balance there too. If you are going to the store, you're on a street that I paid for with property tax. So I think this is appropriate for even though they are on their own private streets. And of course, this doesn't pay for maintenance. It's just for what we would anticipate any new people needing and what we need to do to provide for them. So I just wanted to mention that.
Please say it one more time. It will not pay for street maintenance. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. You're right. It's in the rules, I know.
And if I could just clarify too, if I understand the history a little bit on the legislature and the timing, they went ahead and gutted through state law this through a bill, the whole development impact fee when we were in a downturn economy. So they're trying to stimulate the home builders and other development to come back, and that was what they were doing. And then they also happened to take some shots at things that they didn't agree with while they were doing that. And this was all my understanding. A Home Builders Association and other industries really helped them craft the bill on this. All the cities in towns in Arizona are all required to go through modeling. They can't just come up with what they think are the fees, and they all use these outside firms. And I have to tell you, Tischler, it used to be just Tischler was the firm, and then Tischler merged with Beese. But Tischler has got a model that has never been defeated at all, the best I understand, successfully defeated at all. And so I was in Peoria in the early 1990s, and in the 80s, our city grew from being 35,000 to about 60,000 in about 5 years. The only way we were able to have growth pay for growth was through development impact fees, and we were one of the leaders at that time. And I remember Mr. Tischler was the actual the founder of that company, and I remember he had done some of this work in California, and this is how we were able to get by, because with that kind of growth, there's no way that you can have your current taxpayers pay for infrastructure. Now, times have changed, and all the cities now are all doing this. And in fact, the Gilberts and Chandlers and everybody around the whole valley is doing these studies and models, and we're required to do updates every so often. I feel very comfortable with what's been presented. I think if there's some debate, if you don't want to go with some of the things that are being discussed tonight, like streets, that's fine. I like the idea of the streets because some of the same streets that we need to do some expansion, like Fountain Hills Boulevard, I believe is in this plan, as well as Shea. I think it helps to have some of that growth, even though, to Councilmember Brown's point, a lot of these developments are self-contained and have a lot of their own private streets or their public streets, but they're put in by the development community. I think it's important for us to be able to have some of those funds generated that go into this, the capital that helps pay for these improvements. Again, we even looked at, I think, Fountain Park, that it's very limited with what we can actually do for Fountain Park. It has to be all attributable to growth, and it's hard. But we talked about maybe doing an expansion of the splash pad that might be attributable to more people living in town. Now, the splash pad went in 2014. I can tell you we've had a lot of growth since 2014, but you have to kind of focus really from this point forward, correct? You can't go back from what it was in 14 and say, well, in 14 our population was this, today it's this, so therefore we're going to try to, soak developers, in the future based on the growth between 14 and now. You have to really, it's focused from now going forward, correct?
Correct.
And just one other thing, these studies that we are mandated to do and to update have to be paid for with the development fee. So that's part of what gets taken out of this. And I wanted to ask you about that. Do they take that into consideration when they give the 10-year figures of what they think we would be collecting? And does that include paying for the study? Is that removed?
We actually set it up where you're repaid in 5 years, because you have to update every 5 years.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that you get repaid by the time you have to do the next study.
Thank you. I don't know.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
How much we paid for this? David, do you remember? B's in the back. She probably's got it off the top of her head.
Yeah, it's in the report.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I just, off the top of my head, don't remember.
That's a test question there.
Yeah.
Thank you. So to get away from money questions, the urban trails that we have, do those count? I know we had the 3 real regular trails that we have, but we have some urban trails that we're working on. Would those be eligible?
So we have trails in here twice, so that you have trails in your parks. So we have a park component for trails, and then you have some trails that are within the street right-of-way. So those are in the street component.
Okay, thanks. I didn't see them. I have to find it. So we interrupted you, but you can go on if you think, or unless we covered it all, I don't even know.
So, what I'm showing up here, these are the land use assumptions. And so, based on the growth rates provided by the Maricopa Association of Governments, we're saying that you should grow by about 2,200 people over the next 10 years, which is about, 1,100 housing units. So when you break that down to single-family or multifamily, we're saying, 670 additional single-family units and 385 multifamily units. So, averaging about 67 single-family units per year and about 39 multifamily units per year. So does that give anyone any heartburn, that housing unit growth rate?
I'm sorry, I was...
That's averaging about 67 single-family units per year and about 39 multifamily units per year. Does everyone agree with that? Do you need to change any of that?
Councilman?
How does that compare?
So I think this is very similar to your recent growth. And we've actually set up the fees where if you grow faster than we're projecting or you grow slower than we're projecting, you're really isolating any effects of that, which is something that we've been asked to do with the last couple of updates in Arizona, because what happens if there's another recession? If you are projecting all this growth, you say we're going to build all of this, you start collecting fees, and then the growth doesn't happen, you're still required to build those improvements. So we've set it up where if you don't grow as quickly, then you just don't need as much, and you're not generating as much fee revenue, so you just build what you can. So that's why you'll see a lot of incremental expansion in here, and that basically says we want to maintain our current level of service. So if we grow 10 times as quickly as what we're projecting, then you generate 10 times as much fee revenue, so you can afford to build that.
I think that's an interesting and very good methodology, because we're going to have a recession. It's only a question of when.
Correct.
And we don't want to get stuck when we have it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, and then on the non-residential side, again, we're looking at the MAG projections. So they're saying, employment growth over the next 10 years of about 872 jobs. We convert those jobs to non-residential floor area using employment factors from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So we're saying that those 872 additional jobs, that translates into about 431,000 square feet of non-residential floor area. And so I don't know if you can see up there a little bit better, but we're saying, about 13,000 square feet of industrial development over 10 years. You have limited land available for industrial development, so, a low number makes sense. Commercial development, we're saying, about 200,000 square feet over 10 years. Institutional development, so that's, any of your city buildings, schools, churches, anything like that, about 132,000 square feet, and then office development of about 89,000 square feet. So, these are very conservative projections because we don't want to come in here and say, oh yeah, you're going to grow by, 2 million square feet over the next 10 years, just to get your fee really, really low. We want to provide something that actually makes sense.
Same question as before. How do these figures compare?
So with this, some of these are a little more than what you've had over the last 10 years. And part of that is because, if you look at a 10-year average, the first half of the decade is very low because of the recession. And then, you look at the last, 4 or 5 years, it's much higher. And so we're trying to sort of find that average of, we know at a certain point, the non-residential growth will start to taper off just because, there was pent-up demand from the recession. So, what makes sense, what's a conservative projection, for Fountain Hills? And, we're thinking this is, it's a pretty accurate projection of what could happen.
I don't know if this makes any sense at all, but does the fact that that more than 50% of our businesses are in-home businesses, and that seems to be a trajectory, does that make any difference?
So what we're looking at really is, your existing floor area. So anyone who's, in an at-home business wouldn't be counted in that. And so really what we're looking at is, what's your current floor area, and, based on employment in those types of developments, what could you expect in similar developments?
Thank you.
All right. So this is, half of what you're really considering tonight, and half of what you would be adopting or potentially adopting at the next public hearing. So, really we want to make sure that we agree with any of this. If you don't, now's the time we can make, adjustments to this. But, at the next public hearing, you would potentially be adopting these land use assumptions.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll start with Parks and Recreation. So we're looking at a citywide service area. We're looking at developed parkland, community park amenities, park trails, and then, of course, repayment of the development fee report. So with developed parkland, we're doing an incremental expansion approach. And we're saying that over the next 10 years, you would need 10.3 additional acres of developed parkland, and that would cost about $410,000. We got that based on your existing developed parkland, so we're saying you have 127 developed acres, and it cost about $40,000 per acre for the infrastructure component of that. This is not including the actual amenities, so just infrastructure needed in any of your parks. So again, if you just maintain that current level of service, then you would need 10.3 additional acres of parkland over 10 years. We use a similar approach on the amenities. So we identified 70 existing park amenities. And so to maintain that going forward, you would need 5.7 additional amenities, which would cost about $1.8 million. Again, same thing with trails. So this is actually, we're saying that you have 9.8 miles of trails today. It costs about $50,000 per mile of trail. So, over the next 10 years, you would need 0.8 miles of trails, and that would cost, about $40,000. So any questions on what's included in the parks component before we look at the actual fee? Okay. So what you can see at the top of this fee schedule is each component of the IIP, and then the cost per person or the cost per job that future development would pay to maintain the level of service. So what we're saying is for residential development, we should charge every additional person $903.02. And then for non-residential development, we should charge every additional job $352.53. So that's the basis, a cost per person or a cost per job. And then to get the actual fee that you should pay, per household or per 1,000 square feet of development, we use multipliers. So citywide, the average single-family household occupancy is 2.15 persons per household. So we just take that 2.15, multiply it by the cost per person of $903.02, which gives us the park fee for a single-family dwelling of $1,941. So any questions on the calculation of that? Okay. Similar for non-residential development, we take the cost per job, multiply it by the number of jobs per 1,000 square feet. We get that jobs per 1,000 square feet multiplier from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So based on different types of development, they say that you have sort of this range of every 1,000 square feet should have this many employees or should generate this many vehicle trips. So industrial development, for example, the Institute of Transportation Engineers is saying you should have 1.63 jobs for every 1,000 square feet of floor area in your development. So what we would do to calculate that fee of 57 cents per square foot is say $352.53, which is the cost per job, times 1 5.63 jobs per 1,000 square feet, and then because you charge fees per square foot, you just divide that by 1,000, which gives us 57 cents per square foot. You'll notice that the current fee on all of your non-residential development is $0. In Arizona, the legislation says that if you charge one type of development a fee, you have to charge all types of development. So we're recommending that you charge non-residential development for parks and recreation components. We've weighted this where non-residential development is paying a very small share. We looked at your current population and then your inflow commuters, and basically we're saying that 93% of the demand for parks come from your residential development, and the remaining 7% is coming from non-residential development. That has been very well received throughout the valley. The Home Builders Association, they have agreed with this methodology. So we really want to get. We know that you're not getting a lot of demand for parks from non-residential development, but we know we need to charge something.
But we don't have to for assisted living or hotel.
Yes, you do. So that center column, the proposed fees, we're saying assisted living, you would charge $216 per bed, and hotels would be $206 per room.
Okay, thanks.
So any questions on parks before we move on? Okay. All right, fire.
You keep asking us if we have questions. What kinds of questions would you expect? Because I'm kind of trusting your math and you're the expert, so you base it on certain statistics that you've taken and then multiply it and divide it. I mean, what kinds are you expecting that we might ask?
Sometimes, I'll get questions on, okay, how did you actually calculate that, or where are these numbers coming from, like the ITE multipliers. Sometimes, well, why did you choose that multiplier? And the answer to something like that would be, well, we look at the types of jobs you have today and the types of jobs you're likely to get, and we pick a multiplier that is similar to those. Because if you looked at, and this is in the back of the report, you can see a list of the different multipliers, but for industrial, you have light industrial, you have manufacturing, you have warehousing, mini warehousing, transportation. So there are many different multipliers you could use, so we want to make sure that we get one that's most reflective of the types of development that you'll have over the next 10 years.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so next up we have fire. Again, we're looking at a citywide service area. So for facilities, we're looking at the incremental expansion methodology, apparatus, also incremental expansion, equipment. Just to explain that, it's defibrillators and radios, all rolled up into just one equipment category. Incremental, and then the cost of repaying the fee study. So, we were saying, hold on, I wrote these in just to have them. So we're saying that you have 16,000 square feet of fire facilities today, and based on what it cost to build fire station number 2, you spent $423 per square foot. Now I heard that you basically were $600,000 short on building fire station number 2. So do we need to look at this $423 per square foot for additional facilities? That seems to be about where most cities in the valley are, between $400 and $500 per square foot. But this is something we could look at. If you have a better estimate than what you spent on fire station number 2, we could adjust this number.
Grady, what do you think about that?
Well, I think the big question mark is state trust land. And if state trust land develops, and I think we took a very conservative approach on assuming that there would not be development up there, because I believe the previous plan had identified a third station up in the state trust land. And so I would rather be a little bit more conservative on this. And I don't anticipate really having more than the 2 stations that we currently have in town, unless we have state trust land eventually develops.
Yeah, and there was a myriad of reasons why the other one was over. So I think we're probably okay with this figure, right? Okay. Oh,
so what we're saying
Councilman?
is that, to
Sorry.
maintain... Oh,
excuse me.
Just technological innovation. is outpacing just about everything else. And 10 years is a long time. What if there's new apparatus or new things that we need for our fire stations?
Well, remember, you have to update every 5 years. So, hopefully 5 years from now, or, let's say 3 years from now, some sort of new apparatus comes out. You'd be close enough to an update where you could include it in the next update. But also, you want to make sure that whatever types of apparatus you're including in your existing base, that your future purchases are similar enough to that. So, I had a conversation in Flagstaff about a month ago, and they were saying, all of a sudden we have this boom in student housing, and, we're building higher, and so we need, ladder trucks that are much taller. Well, they don't have anything like that today. And so I said, okay, well, you can use your impact fees for part of that, but it's not similar enough to what you have today to cover all of it. So, existing development would need to fund a portion of that. And so, I have a similar response to that is if it's very different, then, existing development would need to pay for part of it to raise that level of service. Okay.
And Ben, just so I understand, so in the case that you have up there where it says, 10-year demand is a half an apparatus and the 1,450 square feet. So that's like additional capacity at the current fire station.
Yeah,
correct?
If you wanted to expand one of your fire stations, add a bay to it, then you could use your impact fees for that.
Or if we currently have a bay, but then to add the apparatus, that would just be that pro rata share of a half an apparatus, and the town would pick up the balance for that as well.
Exactly.
So it's not going to be a full cost recovery on that, just the growth paying for that portion of it.
Exactly. All right. So similar to how we calculated the parks fees, we come up with a cost per person and a cost per job. So we're saying for single-family development, you should charge $524 per unit, which is an increase of about $224. Just to let you know, a lot of your fees are much lower than what we're seeing in the rest of the valley. The fire fees, and I was doing this quickly before the presentation. The fire fees are really ranging from $400 to $1,100 in the valley. So this is still on the low end of what we're seeing in the Phoenix area.
And Ben, just for our reference too, could you just kind of name off a lot of the clients that you've done other of these studies as well?
I mean, right now we're working, Salt River
past
is,
clients and current.
Yes, Salt River, they're adopting, so they're finished. But right now we're working with Tempe, Buckeye, Surprise just adopted, Avondale recently adopted. We're kicking off Pinal County next week. Casa Grande, Eloy. I mean, most of the cities in the valley.
Yeah. So to my point, I mean, we really do have the preeminent one for the whole state. I mean, we when I brought this to Craig's attention, Craig was familiar with the one that we currently have before we approached this firm when we did a RFP, and he was really surprised and found that, wow, I'm impressed with their client list because it's the who's who, particularly of the high growth cities in the valley. I didn't mean to interrupt. If you could just continue.
Fine, I could take a sip of water. All right, so any questions on fire before we move on to police? Okay. So with police, again, it's citywide. We're only looking at the stations with this. So we're saying that you have 4,900 square feet of law enforcement facilities, and it would cost you $222 per square foot to build facilities. So if you maintain your current level of service, you would need 464 square feet of additional facilities over the next 10 years. So if you collect this money, you have to spend it. And, 464 square feet, it's on the low end. I mean, if you were going to do, a report writing area or, a very small substation, you could probably fund, something that's small, in conjunction with some other project. Maybe if you were doing a community center and you wanted to add, 400 or 500 square feet to that for police, that would work out. But, it is a very small component. And so I just wanted to remind you that, if you collect it, you have 10 years to spend it. So, I wouldn't let this one fall under the radar. And, I would make sure that, you do have some sort of plan to use this if you adopt the police component of the fee.
Councilman Sharna?
Thank you. So I guess back to Councilman Brown's earlier point, if the law didn't change and you're proposing we institute several new fees that we aren't currently charging for, and so the basis for that is just because that's what everyone else is doing, or it's smart planning, financial planning, or I mean, is it because of the change in firms, or what is the reasoning behind adding additional fees that we didn't have before?
So, just discussions with staff saying, hey, what do you actually need? And I think with police, let's see, you're using the sheriff's department, correct? Okay. But, you may potentially, that could change in the future. Maybe you just need your own, dedicated space, any number of reasons. We can include a police component. This is the only one where, I have concern because it's only, I'm just saying, you would need 464 square feet. It's a very small amount. And so, that's sort of a discussion for all of you to say, does this make sense to include? Do we have plans so we can actually use this money?
So after 10 years go by, for example, we don't spend it and we have to give it back, I mean, do we track down the developers or individual, builders that built a single-family home? How does that work?
So if I can just chime in on this, a previous town attorney that worked for us had mentioned that the way the state law is written, you could actually have it transferred to another development impact fee fund. And so that had been something that had been discussed. So we would probably want to take a look at that again, because it doesn't sound like you can do that, but the law actually spelled that out as an option. If it's not spent for the purpose that it was originally collected, you could turn it back to the developers that paid it, track it down, or which would basically be the homeowners, or you can go ahead and it could be transferred to another appropriate fund where you may not have enough money. And I was always stunned by that, because it doesn't sound like, okay, they're not related to one another, so how could that even be? But he said there's some nuance with the way that the law was written that you could do that, and you're looking like you're probably shocked by that.
I know that the pre-2014 legislation basically said if you didn't spend your money by a certain date, then you could disperse that to other funds. I'm not sure that you can do that with...
Could you do us a favor and just, I think that's helpful to have,
Yeah,
maybe by the time we come back with the next public hearing?
Yeah, I can look into that, because I know the main option, or what everyone's afraid of, is actually the administrative burden of refunding that money. Because what if someone, built their house, they've moved out, someone else has moved in? I mean, how do you track down who the money should actually go to?
Yeah, there seems like there would be a provision for something we could do if we didn't use it. I don't know, David, or do you know what our balances are in our development fee funds are now? And then I think in the past, we had 20 years to use it, because I know we talked a lot about that when we talked about Adero Canyon, and that we had to get going on the trailhead, and we did do that, but do we have other funds with balances that that are going to fall under this, or were they pre-2014, or how do you think that works, if you know?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I know there are two funds with fund balance as of the end of fiscal year 19. I will say that the audit's not complete, not quite, so they're subject to change. The fire fund has about 274,000 in it, and Parks has just under 717,000.
And
I'm not sure.
And I don't want to put you on the spot. I just thinking if those are in a 10-year or a 20-year, and then what would we do with them if we don't use them that, currently?
I have definitely made that note tonight during this discussion. I'm not sure when they were implemented. I'd have to go back and look at the last audit, SDF audit, to see when they...
Thank you. Because if there is a provision, do we make interest on this money that's in funds?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe it's not a risk to collect the police, but we'll have to find out for sure, because, you have a point there. We don't want to collect something, and if it takes a little off of the per home thing, we're happy to do that, but we should find out for sure. Do we get interest? What would be a possible penalty? Obviously, we're not going to track down individual homeowners, so thank you.
Absolutely, all fund balance is in our investment pool, so
thank
it is earning interest.
Thanks.
All right, so if you move forward with the police fee, it's $40.11 per person or $9.82 per vehicle trip. So on the single family fee, that would be $86 per housing unit. On the non-residential side, it's similar to the others. You take the cost per vehicle trip, you multiply it by the number of vehicle trip ends generated by 1,000 square feet of development, and then multiply that by a trip adjustment rate, which basically means, so industrial development, for example, with 50%, you don't want to count both ends of the trip. You want to count it as one round trip. So that's all the adjustment rate is doing. And then you're dividing by 1,000 again, because you're only charging per square foot. So it's $9.82 times $4.96 trip ends per 1,000 square feet times a 50% adjustment rate divided by 1,000. So that's how we're getting the 2 cents per square foot of industrial development.
Vice Mayor?
Just quickly, Councilman Charnow makes a good point, and it's obvious we have 10 years, I guess, to spend this, but if we're collecting zero and we want to collect now, and we don't have a plan, I'm not sure that's the best decision, but of course, it looks like we have 10 years to create a plan. Is that our aim?
I think this one is one.
Just making a point.
All right, so now to streets. Again, it's a citywide. So with the arterial improvements, so those are the widening projects on Shea and Fountain Hills Boulevard that we discussed earlier. Those are plan-based, where we're saying we know we're going to build these two components. What can we charge future development? So with this, we've identified 5.3 additional lane miles of arterials, and it would cost $5.8 million to build this. That does not include any sort of other funding that is identified. So with one of the projects, I believe there's $2.2 million of other funding. So we took that out. We don't want to charge future development for that if you've already identified a funding source. So really what we're saying is, these 5.3 lane miles, we can charge development $5.8 million for that instead of the full project cost. With the intersection improvements, we're saying that you had, I believe it's 13 improved intersections today. Yes, 13. And on average, it costs you $625,000 to make an intersection improvement. So to maintain that going forward, you would need just over one additional improved intersection over the next 10 years. And then the multi-use trails, Today, you have 8.7 miles of multi-use trails within the street right-of-way. So to maintain that going forward, you need 0.9 miles of additional trails, which would cost about $560,000.
Question?
Councilman?
Thank you. So we're talking about trails, we're talking about you don't have the ability to utilize the funds for streets. However, what about sidewalks and having the capital improvement for sidewalks, which would be, would that be a trail? Would that be considered a walking?
We get this question a lot. So to include something within the streets IIP, it has to be located within the street right-of-way. So sidewalk, in theory, would be located within. But where a lot of councils get heartburn is that a project level improvement or is it a system level improvement? So, if development happens, should that specific development do the sidewalk? Because, without them, there's no need for the sidewalk. Or, development in the entire area, is it happening and this sidewalk is going to provide a system level benefit. Sometimes you have the cost of a sidewalk included in an arterial improvement, so you would get it anyway. I generally, first I say ask your attorney, and then the next response is usually I would leave out the sidewalks if it's just its own component. If it is part of a larger improvement, then leave it in because that's probably your standard. Hey, if we widen arterial, we're going to have a sidewalk with that. But I wouldn't tell you to say, hey, there's a gap in our sidewalks along this arterial. Let's use funds to just fill in that gap. All right, so any questions on the actual street projects before we move on to the actual fee? Okay. So with streets, we actually use vehicle miles of travel for the demand indicator. So I could go through all of that, which is even more dense than everything else I've told you tonight. But essentially what we're doing with vehicle miles of travel is we know that different types of development generate different numbers of trips. And then we do some sort of trip adjustment rate to make sure that we don't count both ends of the trip. But then we know that different types of development have longer or shorter trips on the overall network. So that middle column in the fee schedule that says trip length adjustment, we get that from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So the national average is that residential trips are 121% of the average trip length, and then all of your non-residential trips are less than the average. So that's how we vary the actual trip length by type of development. So with this, we come up with a cost per VMT. So all development should pay $138.83 per VMT generated. Based on our travel demand model, we say the average trip length on your arterial network, so not your collector or private street network, but the actual arterial network is 6.76 miles. Then we multiply that by the trip ends generated. So for single family, it's 7.29 trip ends. Then multiply that by the trip rate adjustment and then the trip length adjustment. And so we're saying that the average single family dwelling should pay $5,215 for transportation or street improvements. So any questions on that? All right, so just to put it into perspective, in the valley, hold on, make it back to the last page, street fees are pretty much ranging from $1,500 to $8,600 per single family dwelling.
Councilman Sharno?
Yeah, hate to drag it out longer, but a couple living in a single-family house has longer trips than a couple living in a condo unit?
They have the same trip length, but multifamily units generate fewer trips per day on average.
Something new every day. Thank you.
Don't ask.
Thank you. I could really go on for that one, and you really don't want to hear that. All right, so this is just a fee comparison. Your current fees are at the top. So, you know, as was discussed earlier, your residential units are paying $16.01 per unit today, and your non-residential development is paying 24 cents per square foot. So at the bottom, these would be the proposed fees. So a single-family unit, if you adopted these fees, would pay $7,767. And then your, at the bottom, the non-residential fees range from, you know, less than $3 to over $9 per square foot. And then we've actually identified a per bed and per room fee for assisted living and hotel, respectively.
Anybody have any questions? Yes.
All right, I know this sounds elementary, but so if I were to build a house, today I'd pay $1,601, and if I build it after April 5th, I'm going to spend as a single house builder $7,767. Is that correct?
That's correct. Now, keep in mind, you're not charging a street fee today. You're not charging a police fee, and that street fee is the lion's share of this new proposed fee.
Plus, other taxpayers previously paid for a lot of the infrastructure that's already in place, like the fire stations that are already in, the public safety station that we have, you know, all that kind of stuff's already been kind of put in, the streets, all that.
I have quite a bit to say, yes, thank you.
Getting late.
I'd just like to point out that the per room for assisted living is almost $1,300, and the hotel per room is $3,300. I'm sorry that some of these calculations do not make sense to me. Just personally, to have a hotel room where a person might come and stay at $3,300, that's half the price of a single-family resident. They're going to be here year-round. So, the way I feel about this is that this should have been on an agenda item by itself, because the amount of information that you've given us, for us to absorb a tenth of it is almost impossible. And we've got
work study.
We've got 3 more agenda items that are every bit as intense as this. So I have to say, what are we going to vote on tonight?
There's no vote.
This is just the public hearing to introduce it.
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, on Councilmember Brown's point, it's well taken. The one thing I want to just remind you is that the council, I mentioned back in June that we had about 8 major items that we needed to address, and so the council went along with having these combined with regular council meetings, so you didn't have to have separate meetings. I totally understand what you're saying, though, Dennis, and this is pretty heady stuff to be kind of hearing for the first time. You know, do you want to kind of explain schedule-wise and you know, with the law change and how that works? So it looks like it's the next slide.
Yeah, so essentially what happens is, you know, once you're ready, you advertise the land use assumptions and IIP, and you can't do anything for 60 days. Then you can have your public hearing to introduce the land use assumptions and IIP. It's just a public hearing, there's nothing else. Then 30 days later, you can adopt. Once you've adopted the land use assumptions and IIP, then you wait another 30 days and you have your public hearing on the actual development fees, which you've seen tonight. Then you wait another 30 days and you can adopt them. And then once you've adopted them, you have to wait 75 days before the fees take effect. So it's 225 days from start to finish just on the adoption period.
Can we change the fees before we vote on them?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ben, just so I understand it too, would the assumptions have to be changed so that, because that's what the calculations are all kind of based on? So like, as an example, I'm hearing there's probably not a lot of consensus on the public safety fee for sure. And then some of these others, I thought that Councilmember Brown made a really good point, for instance, just questioning like maybe, you know, assisted living versus the hotel room fee. Can they just make those adjustments at the time they go to adopt the fee schedule, or do you need to make some adjustments to the land use analysis and the infrastructure improvement plan?
We wouldn't need to make changes to the land use assumptions. We would potentially need to make changes to the IIP, but we always suggest, you know, if you want to do certain things, let us know, because you're adopting a document. So we want to make sure that you have that updated document at the time of adoption. So if you said, you know what, we're not going to include the police component, well, then we would take that out. And you know, if you said, actually, we don't need separate fee categories for hotels and assisted living, we're okay with just keeping them under our commercial, you know, per square foot classification, then we would just pull those off. And you know, maybe if there was a certain component of one of the IIPs that you said, you know what, we really don't need this, we could pull that out. So
At
there's
the time of the review of the fees, you're saying?
Yeah, we would like to do it
that?
before the adoption of the IIP.
So
But
the next time we come back is November 5th. So could that be done that night?
it could be. Like I said, if you sort of had an idea of some of the things you wanted to change over the next couple of weeks, you could let me know and I could make those changes.
I think, Grady, I don't know if this is okay, but if everybody that has, or anybody that has particular concerns with one aspect or another of this, maybe we can have discussions like that before we get to the 5th, so that we get presented that night with something that's
a good idea.
Largely acceptable. One thing that maybe I'm guilty of from knowing so much about this is that the assumption that I thought that once we decided the land use part, which seems pretty innocuous, it's got a methodology attached to dollars. And it's a methodology that's been mandated down on us, that the state has blessed, and the state in its motivation to keep these as low as possible. So when you see these amounts that come out due to the fact that this is what MAG thinks is going to happen in the next 10 years, it seems like it's just math. And so maybe a more general description of what this is, an overview, and you did do that, but it is a lot for anybody that's not even familiar with this process, which makes sense that a lot of people aren't. And also maybe talk about some of the other cities, and as we do with sales tax and other things like that, so that we know, are we, you know, if we do this with a hotel, are we like, okay, is that like way more than is happening in Paradise Valley, for instance, or something like that. So maybe we help clarify the whole thing a little bit better, so that we know, because that certainly looks like an alarming amount for a hotel room. So, but maybe it isn't. And it could be because this is all real new to a lot of us. So that'd be all right to do that. So what I'll do is take public, if there are any cards for this, no, because that's the hearing, and then I'll close the public hearing, and then we're not voting or anything. This was just for information, and then going forward, we'll try to come up with something for the 5th. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Griffin, I just want to thank you. You helped me understand it much better after reading it a couple times, so I really appreciate that. I just think it may not have, definitely it's the density of the stuff, but, you know, I had time to prepare. But I think, too, it might be helpful for this kind of thing if we could know ahead of time that this is what we can do, right? For example, now we're learning that we can tell him certain things and he can change all this. I didn't know that before I came here, so I wasn't really thinking of that as my end goal. So that would be helpful too.
Okay, we'll work on that. Good suggestion.
Councilman?
Well, thank you, and I think it's important to note, I mean, this isn't just the consultant recommending this, has been reviewed by staff, and this is staff approval and recommendations as well, and they gave input to the consultant in terms of the types of fees and the categories and such, so this isn't just willy-nilly thrust on us, this is something that's coming from.
Absolutely. In fact, part of this process is that consultant met with the staff, identified what the needs were, also looked at capital plans and things of that sort. So they had a pretty good idea of some of the infrastructure needs of the town, and then try to figure out which of those were attributable to growth. So good point on that. So
Thank you. Then I'll close the hearing. And we'll thank you very much for coming out and explaining all this, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, sir. Well, now we're just going to talk about the general plan, so let's, would you like to?
yeah, that's a great idea. if you
Okay,
don't
let's
mind.
take a little break, thanks. So we're going to talk about the general plan and really just the kind of the process part, right?
Mayor, Council, the process to some degree, but we have, as I'll talk about, received a first section of the revised plan. And this one starts to establish the vision and kind of the philosophy that we're applying to the plan.
Yes.
So one of the things we are looking for tonight is going to be some feedback from the council. We want to know that you feel like, while a lot of details will change as we go, that we're at least heading down the right path. Because if we're heading down the wrong path, we need to know that now.
Okay.
So we can adjust before we get any more work done on it. So we are looking for that feedback.
Thank
from
you.
the council as we go through. So the general plan, so again, starting off with the process and where we are. This shows we've been through the first two steps, getting the background, starting to put the pieces together. We're now on the very important step 3. This is where the plan itself will be drafted and prepared for future P&Z recommendation and council vote. So we're getting the plan in pieces. We received the first piece in early August, and staff has reviewed it, given it back to the consultant to address the corrections and comments that staff provided. We received a second installment just last week of the plan. We'll get the third installment the 1st of October, and that will really have just about all the plan at that point. There'll be one last piece in terms of the administration that will come with a rewrap of all the previous sections and comments in early November. We are planning a stakeholder review of then the complete draft plan for November 20th in the afternoon, and then a general public open house the evening of November 20th to give us feedback on the draft plan. We'll take the comments we receive from that, work with the consultant to then prepare what we'd call a final draft plan right after the first of the year before we enter the state-required 60-day review process, then move on to the public hearing, things that are in step 4. So again, this is the time here over the next few months. It's going to be pretty intense time to review the plan, get the feedback, getting revisions done, because we are into that deadline of getting this to council for your approval by June of next year, so it can be on the vote on the ballot in November of next year. So again, where we're at, the basic overall outline of the plan has 5 sections. The ones in the dark blue are what we had received in early August that staff has reviewed. We've started to receive some of the other ones now that we'll talk about a little bit later. And so, again, one of the key pieces in this early draft is what's our vision? Where are we trying to go? What do we want to be as a community? And so I'll just put it here in the pieces. So picture inviting desert oasis in the Phoenix metropolitan area, a region, place where native desert vegetation, topography, and natural resources are valued and preserved. Distant mountains by day and countless stars by night offer a magical setting. Neighbors and visitors gather at special events and festivals. Unique recreation, dining, and shopping options abound. Innovation and creativity deliver meaningful employment opportunities. A variety of housing options are available in safe, quiet, pleasant, enjoyable neighborhoods. And so, Fountain Hills, your future awaits. That's kind of
There you go, Alan. That's what we want to be. That's what we are.
We have taken things that we've been hearing from the public and putting that together. And so with that, also the basic philosophy behind this plan, we're looking at it a little bit differently than plans have in the past. State statutes mandate certain elements and topics that be covered in the plan. And a lot of times, and certainly in the past and with Fountain Hills, we've looked at each of those elements just kind of in isolation. What's the land use, what's the streets, what's the parks? And that's helpful and make sure that you have addressed all the topics, but it doesn't necessarily really address the complexities of a town and its growth and its needs. And so we are proposing to do this again a little bit differently. Instead of looking just at land use, this is single family at this density and single family at that density and multifamily at this density. What is the character of the town in various locations and various categories, and how do we maintain that character? How do we establish a character if it's not there as we continue to grow or change? It allows us then to integrate the different components that are required by state statute and look at them in a more holistic manner in a way that really applies to the town. It gives us more flexibility then to respond to the needs of the town. And so with that, we get to the vision by integrating neighborhoods, environment, and the economy to create a thriving community. bring those, again, the pieces together in a holistic way, again, instead of looking at those things individually. And stop me at any time if you have questions or comments that you want to make. With regard to this idea of talking about character versus just land use, so again, we look at things a little bit differently. What is that basic land use? But also with that, what's that intensity and density of building? What types of buildings in terms of heights and lot coverages? Because that differs. We'll see this as we talk about it in just a minute. You just think downtown here with the town center that's right here versus just to the west and what we call the Commerce Center with the Bashes and the Safeway. They're both commercial areas, but they're built very differently. And so what are those characters of those areas? It allows us to look at that and think about those, again, a little bit more holistically. Provides us, provides us the greater flexibility then as we look at things, as we might talk about a little bit later, as we go down to the target center. And if we're more flexible, to say, well, this is commercial, well, that's one way to look at it, but if we have, what's the character we're trying to establish here in terms of a shopping district to allow different uses to come and go to create an active center. So the character areas, this map shows the character areas that we're discussing at this point in the plan. You can see most of the town is designated yellow. It's our residential areas, it's our neighborhoods, key component to major feature of the town. Beyond that, we have the Commerce Center, again, the area, Bashes, Safeway, shopping center areas, the town center area. Moving down along Shea Boulevard, there's what's currently being called the Shea Main Gateway, down at Saguaro and Shea, that includes that different type of commercial industrial area. We have the Saguaro Boulevard area, just kind of southeast of the downtown area. Then we designate some of the open space and parks and so forth. But also, as I found the interesting discussion earlier with regard to the entries into town and the importance of those. These are highlighted on here, something that we need to consider and look at a little closer. So then looking at what each of these different character areas mean a little bit. So in terms of neighborhoods, again, they're primarily residential, but neighborhoods aren't strictly residential. They include schools and parks and maybe some small offices, some small retail might be a part of making a neighborhood. And so we look at those kind of, again, holistically. The main idea, the plan at this point for these neighborhood areas is to maintain them. We've got good quality neighborhoods. There's a little infill needed, a little bit of redevelopment here and there, but it's mostly what do we do to maintain our neighborhoods. With regard to the Commerce Center, again, it's the area to the west here. Primarily it's a commercial area. It's got some office. It's got a little bit of residential mixed in with it. It's a suburban, auto-oriented type of commercial area. Plan, again, is largely maintenance, but what can we do to encourage additional infill and improve some of the transportation options, circulation options available within the area. The town center is a multi-story mixed-use area. It's got both some urban and suburban forms in the area, the common parking area. So within the plan, we start to talk about encouraging further development following that more urban form, improving that walkability, architectural consistency with the small town theme, and really creating that vibrant town center. Shea Main Gateway, it's a low-intensity commercial area with industrial. It's auto-oriented, mostly single-story. Parking lots plan, how do we really engage this, enhance it as the entry into the town? How can we do the infill and redevelopment to make it more viable and consistent with the town center or the town's identity and to increase that mix of uses? Saguaro Boulevard, excuse me, 1 or 2 story commercial, light industrial type buildings. It's pretty low intensity. General maintenance, but there's some redevelopment opportunities we feel in that area to make it more viable, more productive, and what can we do with this Saguaro streetscape along that area. Section also then with regard to the character areas includes a set of goals. I won't read all of these. With each goal, there are a number of objectives also that step us into how we can try to implement these things in the town as we go forward with decisions that come before you, redevelopment opportunities that come up. So again, that's a quick overview of about a 40-page document that does really set the basis for where we go with the general plan. And again, looking for any comments that you may have. Does it feel like we're headed down the right path with the basic philosophy and the character area approach?
Thank you so much. Any questions? Councilman Charno?
Yeah, I like the character area approach. I think it kind of summarizes neatly and crisply the different areas. Question on the Swirl Boulevard one, you know, the plan says to maintain and redevelop. Just wondering if, you know, and I know it says improve Swirl Boulevard streetscape, but I wonder if, you know, it should, instead of maintain, maybe improve and redevelop, or does redevelop kind of imply improve?
Mayor, council member, hopefully redevelopment would be, include some improvements that are needed there. And in case I didn't say it before, again, on details like this, certainly there could be modifications as we continue to get council and public input on exactly how some of these things are worded, what the, you know, the specific goals and objectives are. But yes, I think the main part of your question was, yes, we do see some needs for improvements there. That would be part of it.
And then the tagline, you know, future, what is it?
Future awaits.
Is that just targeted toward this general plan? I mean, I assume it's not a new branding or marketing term?
Absolutely not. This is a really a land use plan, really. That's what it's all about. It's not branding or marketing that we're going to use that for.
Okay, good.
Mayor, if you don't mind, we've been playing with that tagline quite a bit, so if you got suggestions
Seriously, if you have great ideas, we'll take them.
We've had several iterations already.
Councilman in the magazine?
Let me make it clear, I'm no expert, but I was a senior consultant with the Real Estate Research Corporation in Washington, was involved in plans. And I guess the first thing I would ask is, what is this meant to achieve? What's the overall objective?
I guess the bottom line is to help guide the council in making decisions with regard to land use and development in the period that this plan's effect, you know, 10-year period.
I guess some of my concern is that a lot of it is descriptive and not prescriptive. And I'm wondering when we send it to the citizens, now this is just a draft and we've got more to do, but I'm wondering what the citizens are going to respond to. For example, under vision, native vegetation, topography, and natural resources are valued and preserved. Of course. It's always been the case since the town was founded, and there are other things like that. Mm-hmm. Distant mountains by day and countless stars by night offer a magical setting. I would think that this would be much more prescriptive in terms of what we want to see 10 years from now, or along the continuum to 10 years, rather than describing who we are, where we are, what we are, and so on.
Okay.
You want to comment on
Sure,
that?
yes, Mayor, Councilmember. And so, you know, the vision statement is a foundational piece to help set us in a direction of what some of the important values are that we've understood from the town. When we get into the goals and the policies, there we do start getting much more prescriptive. And just to you know, pick the first one here in the list, again, I just put the goals in the plan. So goal 1 about maintain and protect existing neighborhoods. There's 14, I think, policies under that. And so one of those, evaluate existing retail trade, capture leakage to support revenue generating commercial retail uses and ensure long-range fiscal reliance. The next one, direct commerce and employment to the character areas that sustain them in conformance with the character areas in Table 1. And so there are a lot of very specific policies that we'll then use to really implement beyond the initial kind of fluffy language to kind of set the tone.
Okay. With regard to vision, and this is just me, okay? I mean, these things to me are not vision. Vision to me is our financial dilemma is solved. The town has seen an influx of small high-tech companies. Our roads have been brought into compliance with new standards adopted by the council, and so on. To me, that connotes a vision. That's what we want to be able to say 10 years from now, or 5 years from now.
Okay. Valid point.
So I just think...
I just wanted to just say, I think what you're mentioning is very valid, council member, but it probably fits more with a strategic plan, which is a vision. Yeah, it's more goal-oriented. A lot of it has to do with the finances of the town, sustainability of our finances to be able to achieve those. Again, this is the land use, guiding the land use and future development of the town, this general plan.
And why is it called vision? Why is the vision in here then? I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Right.
But it makes me question.
Well, there's a vision statement with any kind of a plan document.
I'm sorry?
any kind of a planning that you do, and you've had some experience, I know, with this, any kind of a planning document that you end up developing always has a vision statement and a vision. So, John, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Mayor and Council Member, as Town Manager is saying, virtually all plans of this nature will have some kind of target that you're shooting for. And my experience with this type of general plan document, which is pretty broad and long range and trying to encompass a lot of aspects of the community, the vision statement is typically a little bit broader and, again, I'll say fluffier compared to a strategic plan where you have much more specific target that you're after, much more specific goals that you're trying to accomplish.
Just finally, I don't want to belabor this, and I've said this before. Personally, I wish the legislature hadn't passed a law saying we had to do this every 10 years and spend $150,000. Because I don't think it's going to hold us in good stead, and I think it's going to, it may, well, I have to withhold judgment until I see the whole plan, but I'm afraid it's going to raise more questions with the citizens if they read it than answer questions. So.
If I may, to me, the general plan is a document that we use as a guide for these land use, but the vision part, so let's just say we want a walkable downtown. So we say that's a vision, that's an idea that we say. Not every city wants that, not every city has that same, we don't all have the same goals, but for Fountain Hills, let's just say that was in our previous one. And it said to do that, then it had writing this big that said we should have parking on Saguaro Boulevard. Saguaro Boulevard should just be 2 lanes. That whole area should be a slow down area and to connect downtown, to connect to Avenue to Fountain. So it's a vision of a walkable, thriving downtown. It's a lot of specific ways that later in 5 years or 2 years they say, why don't we add some parking on Saguaro? Then you say, that's in the general plan. The general plan is voter approved. So the voters will look at this, they'll either agree that this is the vision that they see for our town. They don't see us saying we want a raceway here or something. They're saying this is the kind of land use that we think is compatible with what their vision is of our town as a whole. So it doesn't do what the strategic plan does, which is can be changeable or really this year we're gonna do this to get funding or whatever. It's a long-term planning document that I think helps guide us and ground us on some of the future decisions that we make, which is actually looked at and voter approved. So I think it has value. I wish we didn't have, I don't like mandates of any kind, but I do think it has value to us as a community.
Let me just say, if some of the kinds of specifics you mentioned, like a vision is a walkable community or something, to me that makes sense. That is a vision. Some of what I read, to me, is not a vision. So it depends on how you define vision and how we handle it in the report.
Okay, Mayor, thank you. This is nothing compared to what the public participation meetings represented. I'm reading this, and it's like I was in a different place. I went to those meetings. I participated, and I watched residents participate. And what I'm reading here and how this was laid out, I can understand your frustration, Alan. This is, I wish you had a video of those meetings, because there was a lot of passion in those rooms. And both of them were at the community center that I participated in. And they had visioning, and we went around the room, and we had small groups, and we posted what was important to the community, what was important to the residents that were there, that were participating. This doesn't represent even an ounce of what we went through in those meetings. So I'm disappointed in at least this point where we're at with this. Not from your sake, because I know that you have this company out of Tucson that has been preparing this, but this is a lot of money that I feel that so far it doesn't impress me.
Mayor, Councilmember, if I may, is that primarily with regard to the vision statement and the way it's done, or is it the whole thing in terms of the character
This
areas?
whole
And
planning process report right now, which I don't believe that you put together, I think that this Tucson group did, because they really kind of managed that whole process while we had the public participation. And I'm just, I'm feeling right now that this is nothing compared to what was represented in those meetings. And most of what I heard in those meetings, I don't even see as what's on this report. So it's as if I was in a different, it was as if I was in a different meeting. So.
Councilman?
Yeah, just one other comment. You might want to take a look at some of the other studies this firm has done, because a lot of this, to me, I may be wrong, a lot of it reads like boilerplate.
Yeah.
Like they've used it before and plugged in other things that are specific to Fountain Hills. I would look into that.
So I'm also wondering, in hearing the comments, it's very good because this is what this is trying to achieve tonight. I can tell you from having been involved at the internal staff level with Mr. Wesley and his staff, what you're seeing in the PowerPoint presentation versus the preliminary report are two different things. And so if you took the time to look at the report, I think the report did a pretty good job of capturing a lot of the public input that we had at those meetings, and it shows a lot more of a flavor than just what was in the presentation tonight. And I'm not trying to make a value judgment, because I think all of what you have to say tonight is very important on this subject. But if you could spend a little bit more time looking at how many pages is this preliminary section of the
47
document?
pages.
It's 47 pages. So I think it's a pretty good document, and I will tell you, I was questioning myself about the whole thing because I know how consultants sometimes work, that they do a lot of these other clients, and they have like copy and paste and you know, cookie cutter approach on stuff. I think we really put this particular consultant through the paces on this, having worked with her. And when we didn't like, she initially even came up with a whole neighborhood concept, kind of segregating the town into different neighborhoods. And we finally said, you know, that's not going to work, because people are going to want to be in this one or this one, and they're not going to understand where you came up with these names or whatever. So I'm feeling really good about this just on the report. But I think what you said tonight, what I've heard from the council members, is very valuable input, and we're going to take this back to the consultant as well.
But I would ask that if you have a specific thing that you don't think is in here, like the commerce and employment character areas on page 286, if you're seeing something there specifically that you don't think happened at those meetings that we were at, or you think something is, you know, really missing, I think we really need to know what specifically you mean, because
the staff really wants to know that.
You know, I'm not sure. I don't see what specifically is missing from some of the things that were said at those meetings, but I think I only went to one of them. Councilman?
Well, and I think too, I mean, this is what, 1/5 or 2/5 of the whole thing?
Correct.
So there's ample opportunity in the future to incorporate.
Take a look at the one we have now. You'll be amazed.
Yeah. And getting back to the vision statement, I mean, I understand vision statements. It's just, I don't know, you know, magical. It's almost a little too fluffy for me. Maybe just some minor editing would be appropriate. And then, you know, we're preserving native desert vegetation, topography, and then we're also promoting a variety of housing options that are available. And I can see how those almost conflict in terms of could be used against us, like in future development plans that might be coming forward to us in the next couple of weeks. So I don't know how that all works together in terms of creating a vision. You know, I know we have the washes and we have, you know, OSR requirements for certain plans and stuff, but I don't know if that can be fixed at all.
Councilman Tulloch?
Thank you. I think that it just has to be more precise, and you had a lot thrown out here. But what I heard in those meetings that I attended is people want a vibrant downtown. They want commerce. They want to do all we can to increase tourism and have the park, an exceptional park, tie in with Fort McDowell and have tourism. That's what I heard. And I don't see it. I guess it's just there's a lot on here, and if we're going to really have a vision, if we're going to really have a plan, I think we have to be a little bit more specific on what direction we're going, and we have to have buy-in from the community. So they weren't very well attended participation meetings. So that's an issue in itself. And I said that to the consultant. I said, I don't feel really good about the participation in these meetings. You know, if you have 20 people and you got 20,000 plus residents of the town, it's not very good participation. And whether they get out there and do further outreach, community coffees throughout neighborhoods and talk to people, I don't know what they do. That's what they get paid to do, and figure that out. But I'm afraid that if you come up with something and then suddenly come the spring, we're rolling something out, and now you have 300 people showing up to say, that's not what I want, and that's a problem. So,
Vice Mayor?
Well, I don't know. I just, I'm concerned by what you're saying, Councilman Tolis, because this should reflect what the people are saying. And if there's meetings in which you're not seeing some of the data, and I know that, Grady, you said, well, look at the underlying document. I am. But some of what's in that PowerPoint is quoted exactly from what's in the underlying document. Like page 12 is quoted, page 13. So I guess...
But it's also, it's how many pages, John, the 48?
47, the current.
47.
Just look at right, but our vision is on page 12, and well, I mean, I'll certainly continue to read it, but
as an example, so one of the elements, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the elements, John, is economic development, correct?
Correct.
So is that coming in a future submittal? So the things that Councilmember Tullis had mentioned in the public meetings, because I think I was in your meeting, and I think you were talking about economic development, you were talking about Shea and concerns about that, and you were also talking about downtown, and economic development is a very important element that is actually in the general plan. So that will be addressed, and it's just this, he's taking excerpts, you know, so you don't get overwhelmed with the whole thing all at one time. But I also think that, John, what I'm hearing tonight is I think we're going to have to get back with Maria and the team and try to do some revisions. There's also going to be more public participation, so we're not done with that. Do you want to explain where we are with that?
Correct. So, Mayor, Council, what we'll be doing at a minimum is sort of getting all the documents as they're coming in, posted on the website. We've got a list of, I think it's around 100 community organizations that we'll be sending a letter to, letting them know that the document's available, where to find it, and letting them know that I'm available to come to any meeting that they have to discuss the plan, particularly working through the chamber and other organizations such as that to make sure we have as many opportunities as we can to get out into the public. We will be, we'll also talk about working with the schools so that we can send things out through the students at the school so their parents get them. There's another way to directly contact people about the plan and its the information that's out there, direct them again to the website, make ourselves available. We putting up posters around various city facilities, having flyers available at various places to try to let people know as much as possible that the plan's being developed. Now is their time to comment, advertising the November 20th open house, so we can get as much input as we can through this process.
Councilman?
John, just two quick things. I hope when this is all said and done that there's an executive, what do you call it? Summary that's readable and understandable. Otherwise, and short. I mean, I know it's hard to make it short, but otherwise people just aren't going to read it. Second thing is, Has the consultant seen the results of the survey done by Vision Fountain Hills?
I guess I'm not sure of that, given my tenure here. I think that's been
That was
discussed.
provided, that was before John's time, but when we had the consultant, there were a lot of different documentation. They obviously got the current general plan. They did get the vision report, and there were a number of things. They also got the strategic plan. They got a lot of things that was a good base for them to work from. They also
You'll get more information from that than 20 people in a room. And so I just want to make sure that they're seeing that.
Again, this evening on the agenda, it was the introduction, how to use the document, the vision, which you talked about, existing development, so that's what we have now, and establishment of character areas. All these other are coming in the coming months. But on page 42 and 43 and these other pages in here, there's a lot of detail about the Shea Corridor and about the downtown, and just take a look at it, please. And if you read those things and you don't think they're reflective of what you think they should be, then that would be the thing to contact us about.
And Mayor, if I may, one last thing. I did ask the consultant to evaluate the plan from 2010 and to evaluate all the goals, objectives, and all the initiatives that were placed in that report and give a progress report of what had been done or not been done. Because from 2016, when I was elected, I tried to go back to that plan and tried to move forward with the initiatives, and we had a lot of backlash on a lot of things. So this town has changed quite a bit. So I wanted to really just have that and lay it out, because these mean nothing if you're not going to actually implement.
Good point.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You can wipe the blood off and go home now.
No, I'm getting one more agenda item here. You're not done with me yet.
This next one is yours?
No, that's the last one on the agenda.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, due to the lateness of the hour, I think we can get through F and G pretty quickly. I was thinking that maybe H, if you don't mind. I think there might be a lot of questions on that, and I think that'd be better to postpone that for a future. If you don't mind, I'll remove that from the agenda, and we'll bring that at a future date.
October 1st. Let's just move it one meeting.
October 1st is going to be a hellacious meeting.
I don't think October 1st.
Okay, we won't do that.
Yeah.
We postpone it.
I don't want to do it.
There's a reason this agenda's like this.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I just said, Dennis.
We'll postpone it.
Okay, so we'll move on then.
The best document that I've seen come out of Town Hall.
Nice.
This was outstanding.
Oh, good.
On
The HP?
easements.
Oh, okay. Then we'll go on then to the minor reorg item. Grady?
Yes, real quickly. Mayor and Council, for some time, I've had a desire to relocate the tourism function to economic development. In fact, when Scott Cooper was the economic development director, he and I had discussed this, and it was something that eventually was going to happen. Now that we have a new economic development director, I think it really makes a lot of sense. So the item before you is a reorganization. It's minor. It would be transferring the communications and marketing coordinator from the Community Services Department and have that position report to Economic Development. The Volunteer Program Coordinator is a function that you'll typically see in community service departments or Parks and Rec departments across the country. And there was a reason several years ago, I don't want to go into it, why it was put under the manager. Some of you who've been around for a while probably remember why. And it worked really well. And so long as we had the previous volunteer coordinator, I was delighted to have that under me. I think this is really the appropriate location to have this position, is to have it in community services. Position will also be working right out of the community center where a lot of our volunteers work directly out of. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have. There's no changes in salary, job descriptions, other than the job descriptions are reflecting the supervisory relationship changes.
Move approval. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2019-51, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Real quickly, the next item is a resolution which would authorize the town manager to engage in data sharing, collaboration, and exploration of East Valley Regional Solutions to help solve the homelessness issue. As you're aware, the homelessness issue in the East Valley has become a lot more prominent, a lot more visible. We never used to see this so much even in our town, and in the last couple of years we've been seeing more and more homeless in town here as well. This basically is the city managers have been meeting for the last couple of years, and we've come up with what I consider a really good resolution, which would basically have us try to come up with best practices to try to deal with a regional solution to homelessness. And so with that, there's no commitment here of resources, anything other than directing the town manager to still be engaged with this issue and come back if there are any best practices back to the council. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Yes, Councilman?
Just picking up on your language, you said if there are any best practices, there must be, so.
Well, there
sure
are, but what we're finding on this particular issue is that in the past, it was more of a conventional, traditional kind of issue of homelessness. What we're finding is a lot of the homeless now are becoming more acclimated to this lifestyle. And so it's harder to get them convinced to go into temporary housing or shelters or things of that sort. So that's what I'm kind of saying. So this problem is across the whole country, the same situation we're dealing with here. You see in San Diego, LA, San Francisco, Seattle. And it's becoming more problematic to try to come up with solutions. The old solutions of yesterday are not the same ones for today to solve these problems.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-44?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just would add that we have one written speaker card in favor of this.
Oh, thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We had someone speak about Palisades and Sunflower and that, and you said you'd bring that to staff, and then a safety net was also discussed. Does anybody have anything else for the town manager? The Eagles do. Well, then, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, we sure do.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.